Oh, and there's another seat? There's one seat, second row here.
There's Harry. When do we be here?
Best seat in the house, man. Best seat in the house.
Yeah.
I found that, not good to really read it, but.
Yeah, we came close.
Everybody connected?
Thank.
I usually wait for my computer to give me the time. I have 6:59. It should turn over here real quick. Get started with the meeting. Let me say up front, if you haven't signed in for this meeting, the sign-in sheets are at that lectern. So we encourage you to do that before you leave tonight, especially if you're speaking and making comment. We like to make sure we get the right person with the comments that are made. So, all right, I'm going to call this meeting to order. This is our first meeting of the 2019. It's our first business meeting of the year 2019. We welcome you all for coming. This is quite a crowd. We're going to start out. All of those who are able to stand, please rise for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Again, I would like to welcome you. Also, in the back of the room, we have Mark Worley. Mark is again this year, 2019, is community media, is filming our meetings. This year, they're actually also going to be present when we have our workshop meetings during the month. And so Mark is here tonight. This will be posted on community media within a couple days, I'm sure. So you'll be able to see that there. Other opening remarks that I have, we have a public meeting that's coming up, a public hearing actually. It's on Thursday, January 17th. It's at 7 o'clock. It's going to be held at the Sterner Building at Rec Park. And that is for the purpose of taking public comment regarding our franchise with Comcast Cable. Our agreement with them, it was a 12-year, 15-year? 12-year agreement. That's going to be ending, and so we're starting the process of reaching a new agreement with them. So part of that is to take public comment, your likes and dislikes about Comcast Cable and any ideas you have for improving their service. We are a franchisee from them, so you can come to that meeting and learn all about what that means and for the borough. So we invite you to that. The other thing I want to call your attention to, the Gettysburg Interloop bicycle trail project that we started last year, and we had a dedication last July for the bridge that goes across Stevens Run along Middle Street. And this recently, within the past couple weeks, we have finished the final piece of that project. And you'll notice when you go by the post office on Chambersburg Street, there's a plaza there, there's a bicycle rack, there's a bench, and there are two wayside signs. One talks about post office history. The other one is a wonderful a photograph of what the Lincoln Highway looked like just shortly after the Battle of Gettysburg in 1863. It's quite a change, quite different than it looks now, but if you get a chance to take that in, go and see that. Okay, another announcement, an executive session. Sessions of the Borough Council were conducted immediately prior to the commencement of the December 10th, 2018 monthly general business meeting and immediately prior to the commencement of a special meeting of the Borough Council held on January 3rd, 2019 pursuant to Section 708A1 of the Sunshine Act. An executive session of the Borough Council will be conducted immediately prior to the adjournment of this evening's meeting, consistent with Section 708A1 and Section 708A4 of the Sunshine Act for the following purposes. 1, to discuss matters involving the employment and appointment, the terms and conditions of employment, and the hiring of a prospective public official or employee of the borough. And 2, to consult with its professional advisors regarding information and strategy in connection with issues on which identifiable claims or complaints have been or are expected to be filed. I have another announcement, but I think what I'd rather do is get through the approval of the agenda and the approval of minutes. So if I could have a motion to approve the agenda for tonight's meeting.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion, questions about the agenda? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that motion passes. Now we have a motion of approval to minutes of the council meeting of December 10th, 2018. I would also add to that, you have in your packet minutes for the special council meeting on January 3rd, 2019, as presented. Okay, so you so move. Do I have a second on that? Any changes or corrections to any of those minutes? All right, we have a first and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, so that's approved. The other announcement I want to make, I don't usually comment on items that are on the agenda at the beginning of a meeting. You know, we get to those as the meeting progresses. But I thought it would be helpful tonight to put this in context because there is obviously a lot of interest. I think it's on, I'm guessing it's on one item on the agenda regarding parking and the bagging of meters, and that is on the agenda for tonight. And I'm happy to see that there's this interest and that you've come out to comment on that. I want to explain the nature of that motion. That motion is to publish the draft ordinance changes for public comment. By publish, it means it would be published and printed in the Gettysburg Times. It will be put on our website, and it will be available for here if anybody wants to read a hard copy at the office. And that is done so that this draft has not been put out to the general public yet. So there's been a lot of talk about it, and council has seen that, those changes. We're here tonight as a council to decide whether that's the language that we want to publish. We are not here to enact that legislation and make it law. So I think it's important to understand that in the process. That's what councils do in a public session. We debate those provisions. So I think it would also help to just kind of give you a brief explanation of the process so you know where we are in that process. So just to start, usually what happens with changes like this to any of our ordinances, most of the times they bubble up to us from staff. Either the borough manager or staff will identify an issue or something that's not quite right or something that needs to be changed, and that information will get to council. And council it's their responsibility to do that when things need to be addressed, whether it's in our ordinance or other items. And they will make recommendations to us about what they think that ordinance should look like, and let us know why it needs to be changed. Council in a public forum will discuss that. We can't, do that out of your view in Pennsylvania. That's covered by the Sunshine Act. And so we would discuss that. In the case of the parking ordinance, we did that last fall at a workshop. We had a discussion about some draft items at that time. And then in a public forum, at a business meeting, we would then, as a council, discuss it again, and we would vote whether or not we wanted the staff to actually create an ordinance. That would involve our solicitor and staff time to put that together. All this is always done in public. We always look to our solicitor to provide us guidance on issues related to that ordinance. So staff then will take that. Usually we try to provide them with a little bit of guidance. They'll do research, and they'll come up, along with our solicitor, with a draft ordinance. And that may take some time. It depends on the specific issue that we're dealing with or what needs to happen with that. And it may require a lot of consultation and more discussions at workshops. When the time comes for review and discussion to get that out to the public, it comes again to a public meeting, and we do that in public. So that's what we're doing tonight. We're voting to publish the draft changes that have been provided to us by staff, and then everybody in the community has the opportunity to see those and comment on those. And then after that, and we've gathered all that comment, which we're going to do tonight here in this public forum, we finally, at some point, will vote for whether or not we want to enact that piece of legislation. So that's where we are in the process. We're at the publishing stage. Do you want to add anything to that?
I would only note that there are some legislative processes that mandate that we have public hearings and so forth. This is not one of those where we are procedurally, and I would indicate that this actually has been kind of a long process. I believe we started having our initial conversations probably back in May of 2018 regarding some of the concerns that are being addressed here. Essentially, we are now at the part of the process or the legislative process where council determines whether or not it wishes to proceed ahead with the ordinance changes. The commentary by the public is essentially, so it's the standard public comment that we have at each one of our meetings when it comes to issues that are on the agenda. So this is not a public hearing. This is your borough council meeting where essentially you initiate that legislative process or the end of that legislative process pursuant to the requirements of the borough code.
Okay, thank you. So, with that as the background, I just want to say something about the comments periods. We do ask that everybody be respectful of each other, take the time to listen to what people say. We ask that you not interrupt when someone is commenting. You'll have a chance to make a comment later. And I will have some more guidance about comments the comment period when we get to that. But I do want to know that I will try to keep you commenters on target. We want you to be commenting on items on the agenda, whether it's parking or any other item, and stick to that. So I think what we need to do now is we do have a special presentation. It's up next on the agenda. Linda Linda is going to give us a special presentation representing Gallery 30. And I believe you have that up. Okay, that's good. Okay, go ahead, Linda. Do you want to stand at the lectern or wherever?
Thank you.
Okay.
just want to thank all of you for your support. It's been overwhelming. I thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being interested. And thank you for standing up for what is right is right. I'm going to introduce Joel Wiener. He drove in 2 hours. He's my attorney. He's been in on this with me. We've been here before, but he's been in on this since May with me. And then Allison Izzard will have a nice presentation just to give you some understanding as to what's been going on. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Joel Wiener. I'm attorney for Linda and for various of her companies, and have been with some, I know Mr. Eastman I've been with before, some of the others. But in terms of it, on a short overview, and Allison will give a quick item there, we appreciate the opportunity to come here and address the commentary period about the parking ordinance changes. I think one of the reasons that Linda has asked for herself to be a special presentation is because as we've read this proposed change, the proposed change affects one person. 3 businesses, but one person, Linda Tia's business. So while we may see the overall of this is just a generic change, what we have is there's only one person whose permits are really going to be affected by this. We also suggest that in the overall view of the world, there are businesses other than just hotels and bed and breakfasts who do need reserved parking. But for a short, what I'd like to do is have Allison give a short presentation, which will help put everything in perspective, and I'll come back again to address a couple other matters.
Now, I just want to make sure we understand that the arrangements were made for a 10-minute presentation.
yes.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you. Try and get through this as quickly as I can.
And I'm sorry, what was your name again?
My name is Allison
Okay,
Izzard,
okay.
and I do the marketing and PR for Linda and her businesses. And we do have some copies of the presentation for those of you in the corner who can't see. Right, if we could advance to the next page. Our opinion is everything that's been presented to this point is really one-sided. It's the opinion of the borough management and the borough that's gotten out to the public through the newspapers, and very little, if anything, has come from the Upper Cross, Gallery 30, and Jamili. Next. So Linda has a significant investment in Gettysburg, 15 years, with, you know, the largest business in town, really, Gallery 30, the anchor store, the Upper Cross, which will be by far the largest restaurant, Jamili, which will open later this year, and some of her previous businesses, as well as the properties that she has restored. So this is a lot of time, this is a lot of energy, this is a lot of effort to build something in downtown Gettysburg. Next. So Gallery 30, I would think most of you have been in there, but if you haven't, it's 9,000 square feet. That's enormous. And we calculated, on average, 145,000 visitors per year that are walking through Gallery 30. And you look at the National Park, this year was just under 1 million visiting the National Park Service for visitation. Next. And the Upper Crust, in terms of size, 10,000 square feet, and seating for 500. The only thing close in town is the Majestic. Next. So this is a view of the Upper Crust as it stands as of just this past week. So we're getting close. So much has been done to, in terms of gutting and rebuilding the restaurant. Next. And you can see where we were, the former Moose. That was last spring. So the state that building was in and what it's become through Linda's investments. Next. Okay. This piece of information has been out there.
Let's go back to that. We'll come back to that. I'll address that.
Okay. What we really want.
I'll tell you, I'll do that. We're going to switch. We're going to do as a joint presentation. So I didn't realize the
That's fine.
odds got changed a little bit. In any event, there's been some commentary that the parking ordinances existed was a loophole. Parking, as was requested by Linda, it was granted for Gallery 30. We have is Gallery 30 has 3 spaces, the upper crust has 3 spaces, and Jamili has 3 spaces. Now, what are they? Gallery 30, most of you know, is a store which sells a lot of unusual items, has elderly people coming in, has people buying big items, such as 2 of the items to my left over here. Those are things that, for various reasons, do need to get carried out to cars, do need to have people coming in, do need to have some of the elderly who want to park and get out, or someone who drops them off. As you're all aware, York Street is a state highway. As such, you can't just park, not that you can just stop anywhere, but a state highway has certain other rules that come with it. By reason of having the parking spaces available there, it allows for someone to pull in, take care of the business they need to at Gallery 30, and then continue on without adversely affecting traffic. At Upper Crust, when it does open up, as we've just heard, it's going to be a 500-seat restaurant. Also, what it has is part of the Gallery 30 was set up with the reserve parking in place as it was being designed, as it was being planned. It was planned, number one is Linda made the decision to buy the Moose based upon what was going on and based upon how it would set up. Number two is that Upper Crust is set up to have takeaway food for people. That means residents of the town who, especially someone who's got their kids with them, pulls up in front, can have somebody take their food out. Anybody, if you're coming in to eat there, oftentimes you drop the people off, the person goes to park. Again, it's not viewed for long-term parking. What it is doing is allowing the flow of people to come and go and to serve what we expect to be, by reason of that number of seats, a higher traffic place. By reason of having the spaces open in front of the restaurant, it will be able to have a flow of cars coming and going. It will be able to allow people to get picked up and dropped off in an orderly fashion and to pick up their food without having to park, leave your kids in the car with all the attendant dangers that go with that, or having to carry a kid and carry your food. And I have enough trouble carrying a pizza, let alone if I carry a baby or somebody else with it. It just doesn't work out that way. So for those reasons, this was set up, there has been, and it's worked out to have these reserved parking spaces. It is something that was allowed under the ordinance. And yes, everybody always says, gee, why'd this guy get to do it? It must be a loophole, but that's what it says. The ordinances are written, they cover the items, and most importantly, people make investments based upon what's there. And in this case, both Jamili and Upper Crust have risen based upon what was known to have the parking and how they set up. As you'll see in a minute, the front of Gallery 30 is set up with the restaurant pushed to the front. If you couldn't get access to the front, then you would have ended up with really no reason other than to beautify the city, which is a good reason, but economically you would not have wanted to put all the items up front, and your back of it is the back of house. In Gallery 30, that's where the inventory is. In a lot of other places, that's where they have their offices, have internal operations that are not public. So unfortunately, the businesses do have the frontage coming on there. And again, as we believe, that's a reason to have, why this ordinance makes sense for a lot of others, in not just beds and breakfast in hotels.
Thank you. Next. Joel stole a lot of my thunder, so we're going to get through the presentation faster. So size and scale, 3 times larger, right? Much, much bigger on both fronts for Gallery 30 and the Upper Crust. Next. And as Joel said, we're not asking for special treatment in any way, shape, or form. And next. So it is for the convenience of our guests, as Joel described. Next. And Joel covered this, the need for the reserved parking that's specific to our guests and customers. So next, please. So we did a quick little diagram here, what it would look like with reserved parking with the 3 spots out front. You know, some of which are occupied. You see other cars on the street. You see cars going in around the circle. And then if you go to the next diagram, so if we don't have reserved parking and somebody just stops because, hey, I've got a passenger in the car, they're going to run in and get the pizza for me, I'm just going to block traffic temporarily. Well, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to do that, right? 500-seat restaurant, getting in and out to drop someone off, or multiple people stopping to get a pizza, we're thinking you're gonna see a couple of traffic jams as a result. That is without reserved parking. And next, so let's walk through the,
Let me go through this, because I only got 2 minutes.
sure, all right.
Thank you. We're trying, I do have a timer running. Just to go over, it's still a minute and a half. Numbers we've said, parking has been available. Linda's acquired these permits in accordance with the requirements. There are not, we've heard comments, zoning's the only thing gives vested rights. The solicitor will tell the board there are other things that give vested rights, that give investment, that give other permitted items, and come back to have basic permissions for people to use the items. The legislation, at least as it affects Linda, we believe is discriminatory. We think also that this is not rationally related to what needs to be done in terms of the studies that would go on with it. And we are aware of the letters that have been out there, certain of the social media, and some comments that have been made there, which have made this a very personal fight. There have been some comments out there that have gone to other people, the point that we understand have raised serious questions as to what's going on. This is something that, while it's emotional to some people, and while it is something very important to Linda's business, it is something that people should be civil about. The other thing that should be done is that we need to take a look at the fact of what is fair, what is reasonable, and also what is protected by constitutional and other rights, especially as we're here in Gettysburg on these items. So in terms of it, Linda has been a strong supporter of the town. She's looking at something that will help not only her, but the people who will come to work here, the people who continue to work here, and items that are essential for public investments. Thank you.
I have a timekeeper over here.
Okay. I apparently started a couple seconds after him. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Do you have one of these handouts that you can leave with Sarah here?
Sure.
Yeah.
Get maybe somebody to surrender one?
Thank you. Okay, now we are going to get to open this up for public comment. Let me say a few words about that. Again, don't forget to sign in before you leave if you have not done that. We have a limit on public comment of 5 minutes. If you can be less than that, we have a lot of people here who may want to speak. That would be great. What we're going to do, we have 2 comment periods, one here at the beginning and one at the end. So this comment period, we're going to limit to agenda items. So that would include the parking, if that's what you're here to talk about. If you have something else you wanted to talk about, you can wait till the end of the meeting. I'm also going to start public comment with, the Sunshine Act requires that we allow public comment of borough residents and taxpayers. So I'm going to start with that, and then after we're through with that, we will open it up to anybody else who has comments on this. So
Do we want to do a pro
no,
part and then a
No.
con part?
no, we'll just take comment.
This is just generally
Yeah,
public comment.
general
Okay.
public comment. You may see us take some notes so that we remember what you said, so that we can consider all of that when we're deliberating. This is your opportunity to comment. Once we close public comment and we start as a council to deliberate the various motions we have, you will not be able to interrupt us or ask us questions or have a dialogue back and forth. That's how this works with the Sunshine Act and with the fact that we have been elected to deliberate this and make these decisions, and you are here to watch us do that. So I just want to make that clear. So if you want to say something, now's the time to do it. So let's start with that. Who would like to go first? Taxpayer, borough resident? Okay, Mr. Shestak, why don't you take the lead?
Good evening, Mike Shestak, 264 Baltimore Street. All I can say is ouch. You know, Last year was a good year for Borough Council, and I'm proud you're all sitting here. And I know you worked hard on the LERTA site, and I figured 19 will be a good year, an easy year, a kind year. Not so. I got back from my Albuquerque address Thursday night, read Friday's paper, Saturday's paper, and today's paper. Focused on the back page. I'm sure you read it. I hope you thought about it. I also, I applaud those ads. They're not cheap ads. And also, I read Harry Hartman's column. Harry doesn't comment unless it's important. He took on Oak Lawn Cemetery, and this is an important issue to him because it's our local paper. I don't get any carryover minutes, so we'll see what happens. Gettysburg is fortunate to have a lot of strong women, and I'm only going to name 5. So, I'm not going to mention you, Susan. You've brought a lot, to the table over the years. You've got 2 here on the planning director, the finance director. But if you look around, you got Monica Oss, Open Hands. You got Deb Adamick, Main Street, Gettysburg. Robin Fitzpatrick, the heavy load she carried there. Chris Gladfelter. And last but not least, Linda Otoya, who's done many good things. I applaud that presentation. My opinion is that Linda has followed the rules published at the time. So I don't think anybody has lied to anybody. Right now, with the ordinance changing, the truth is changing. And I understand that. She's always colored inside the lines. I don't think what she was doing was surprising. You saw the liquor licenses coming. This is like an old song. It's being played since May. I don't think she colored outside the lines. Agreed, she got close to the lines. But as you heard the lawyer say, it's not a loophole. She played by your rules. The Moose, was gutted at great expense. I wasn't a member of the Moose, but there were a lot of things done there that were done illegally. Not permitted, unlicensed plumbers, electricians, the roof needed to be done. What's the county done with St. Francis School? What have they done with American Legion? Sat empty. Look at the buildings and the business she's brought. $145,000 isn't anything to laugh at. I think she ought to be grandfathered. I support her briefing, I support her request, and I urge you to support her also. Your Ready project was a key vote, and that was close, 4-3. I expect this one to be close, but vote your conscience. Listen to the citizens. I don't think you've had this crowd in a long time. I wish you well on what you're going to do. Whatever you do, I'll support it. But you got to listen to these people because they're paying your salary through their taxes. You get a $2,500 honorarium. That's coming out of my taxes. So you got to listen to these people. That's who you're working for. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, who's next? Oh, come on, you didn't all come here to, yes. Mr. Carr.
Chad Carr, 49 York Street. I am familiar with the current reserved parking situation. I am a neighbor, I'm a resident, I'm a business operator on York Street. I have no issue whatsoever with what has been going on the last several months with the reserved parking. We have, as a matter of fact, had no problem running our business as it is with the reserved parking on York Street. As a matter of fact, our numbers in 2018 have never been better. Our numbers were great for all of our volunteers, students, and patrons for over 100 performances at a community theater. Have no issues because there's reserved parking spaces. She followed the rules. If your concern or your argument is money, she's followed the rules. She paid you what you asked. If you asked for a little bit more, I kind of feel like she'd probably give it to you. But she paid you what you asked. If your concern or argument is fair to others, how so? They could have done it. It was in the ordinance. They could have done it too. I could have done it too. Why should she not be allowed just because her business chooses to follow the ordinance and do it? Or just because her businesses can afford it? Should she not be allowed to do that? That's why the ordinance is written. It's there in black and white. If your concern or argument, what if everyone did this and there would be no parking at all? I highly think that is likely. I just don't see it happening, no parking at all. When the parking garage is half empty most days of the year. And the parking garage is literally right behind the street in question. I just don't see that that would be a problem. But if it is, if it becomes a problem and there's just absolutely no parking for anyone in Gettysburg, can we cross that bridge when it comes to it? Leave this woman alone. I have said that in a borough meeting before. She is doing a lot of great good for the town. She's not asking for special treatment. She's just following the letter to the law of how the ordinance was. You all knew about it beforehand. She knew about it. She followed the rules. She planned her businesses around that ordinance. To change the game halfway through is very low. Very low.
Okay, who's next? Yes.
My
Would you
name's Scott
please?
Willis. Yeah,
Yeah.
my name's Scott Willis. My wife and I own two businesses here in town. One at 17 Lincoln Square and the other at 10 York Street. Just wanted to applaud Linda for all the great work and great businesses she's had here in town. I would like to say that, to Chad's comments earlier, that, other businesses have tried to get comparable parking permits. We were denied in 2018 for comparable usage, I think due to this issue. We're here to just make sure that all businesses are treated equally. And if we're going to allow these spaces to be, there are other businesses in town that do want to make use of the space and for the customers and the visitors in place. So we're looking for equality for everybody. One suggestion to throw out there is possibly having 10 or 15-minute parking on each corner of the square. That might be a comparable for everybody to use, for businesses, for restaurants, for retailers, and whatnot. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, who is next? Yes.
My name is Peggy Rock, and I'm the manager of Gallery 30. Probably nobody else here that knows Linda as well as I know her. I met her 13 years ago. I was coming here from central New York probably 6 times a year. I know what York Street was like then. It wasn't like this. It was nothing like this. There was hardly anything to even go into on York Street, Gallery 30 being one of them. Nobody else knows how hard this woman works. Nobody. These buildings, these projects that she takes on, you think they're like crystal clean and beautiful? She works from 6 o'clock in the morning at that building across the street on York Street. 6 o'clock in the morning till 7 o'clock at night, in the filth, in the dirt, with the contractor. She acts as her own GC for every project that she does. And every one of them needs to be restored or rehabbed. She has sunk, I'm not going to say thousands, I'm not going to say hundreds of thousands. She sunk millions of dollars into this borough. Millions. And brought millions of dollars into this borough. Nobody else can do that. Nobody else has done it. Maybe they can do it, but who's done it other than her? So she starts this project over here, which frankly makes the Gallery 30 project look like a walk in the park. That place hadn't been touched in 70 years. It had drop ceiling. She's exposed those beautiful beams that are marked Bethlehem steel. I mean, that place is going to be phenomenal, not just for Gettysburg, but for the entire area. And for her to be treated the way she's been treated, and I've watched it for 12 years, and I am so sick of it. Poor Deb Adamick, I quote her all the time. She knows how sick I am of it. I tell her all the time. It's just not right. Business friendly, I'm sorry, but that doesn't pass the giggle test. This borough is not business friendly. I wish it was. I'm just going to read the rest of my statement because I don't want to get going. Okay, so I've read the proposed revision, and frankly, it's a slap in the face to all of the hardworking business owners in Gettysburg. and I know ordinances. I'm an attorney as well, licensed in New York and Pennsylvania. And this ordinance has been tailored to apply to only one market segment, the hotels, the inns, and the B&Bs. Why? It didn't need to be written that way. The hotels, the way it's written, they're limited. Obviously, you don't want the hotels to get whatever they want and to take up all the parking spaces, so you've limited to the number of guest rooms that they have. So if you can do that for the hotels, why not for the restaurants and the retail spaces? Why not allow the restaurants to have the same right to spaces based on the number of tables or their seating capacity, and stores to have reserved spaces based on square footage? Why not? Why does it have to be written this way? There's no good reason. It's terrible policy. You could have written it so that it's fair. And I don't know, you just haven't chosen to do that, and I don't know why. And frankly, I think that the ordinance as written is an embarrassment. And to allow it to be published this way is just wrong. So it's my hope that the proposal, the ordinance as proposed, you'll see it for the bad policy it is, as it is, and you'll pull it and rewrite it so it's fair and equitable to all the business owners in Gettysburg.
Okay, thank you. Who's next? Yes, all right.
Hi, I'm a vendor who's doing work here at the borough, and I'm here all the time. I frequent all the businesses and shops, etc. And
Could you give your name, please?
my first name is Dana, last name is Stinson, Stinson.
Okay.
And like I said, I'm here all the time. I'm doing business. I've been working with local governments in my profession for over 20 years. I have, everywhere I visit, there are grievances and discussions, gratitude and disagreements. Honest and respectful discourse is a hallmark of how government should be. So while I was here this morning, I came across these full-page advertisements in the paper, and to be quite honest with you, I was sick to my stomach. I see the words being tossed about: discrimination, inequality. As a member of the LGBT community, these words are a frequent reminder of the world we live in and the difficulties we face on a daily basis. Education, housing, public accommodations, healthcare, and even marriage is what comes to mind when one thinks of discrimination and equality. As I continued reading, I was taken aback to discover the full-page ad was nothing more than a dispute over parking spaces. In the words of a popular internet meme, that's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. Just like she did with the ordinance, Ms. Attia and Associates have taken the definition of discrimination and equality and twisted it beyond its intended purpose. Appropriating a word in order to make a mountain out of molehills amounts to nothing more than another chapter in the old story of Peter and the wolf. Words matter. One should know better than to inappropriately use terminology which impacts the very existence of millions, all for a parking space. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Now's your chance. Yes, Ms. Sipperly.
Well, I'd like to zoom out a little bit.
Yeah, do you want to stand up so? Yeah. Well, that's okay. I just want to make sure everybody hears you.
I'm Stu Sipperly. I live on Stratton Street and have for the last 20 years. And obviously, the original parking ordinance was written before a lot of these things happened, so they didn't even have to think about, pull up and pick up your pizza activity. So you can't blame them, but maybe it needs to be updated. But what I think the basic problem or issue here is that it's an urban environment. You're trying to put a suburban style parking thing in, like out at Ruby Tuesday. You can go in and they've got spaces reserved. You can just pull in, pick up your takeout stuff and leave, which doesn't necessarily happen well on a city street, especially one that's as congested as Gettysburg. So it's not necessary. Again, somebody else said, well, what if everybody did it? Well, you do have to think about everybody. And there's other businesses. There's the Chinese restaurant right there that seems to be doing fine without, I've always been able to find a parking space when I order there, partly because nobody likes to parallel park. So But I really think you need to look at Gettysburg as an urban situation, not a place where each individual business can reserve a, you know, whatever you want to call it, pick up or take out or whatever. But it basically comes down to it's trying to fit a large suburban type business model into a urban environment. And I was even thinking about the hotels today. I haven't been inside all of them, but I know that out in back of the Gettysburg Hotel, somebody could pull up, go in and check in, and then go to the parking garage rather easily. And I don't know much about the layout of the other ones in town, but even the hotels aren't, it's not necessarily, maybe they could get a special review for it if they needed it, but it's not. I think maybe the idea of the 10-minute parking, like one on each quadrant of the square or something, I've seen that done other places, but not specifically reserved for certain businesses. So I haven't read the draft yet, but I will.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, yes, in the back?
Yeah,
Yes.
my name is Don Merritz. I've lived in the borough for 30 years. Parking in the borough has always been a hot button issue. There's room for disagreement about some of the things as far as bagging meters, but several things are clear to me. That first of all, newspaper ads are great for generating interest. And look at the turnout here, but not a good basis for deciding what the council ought to do. And let me say a word. I don't know of anything that the council or any borough employee or council member has done that's improper or done for the wrong reasons. If there is such evidence, it should be investigated and acted upon, and there are processes for that, as the attorneys in the room know. I also know of nothing to suggest that the borough manager has his own personal agenda and decides himself what's best for Gettysburg. It's my understanding that it's the council that makes the decisions and the manager who implements them. And so far as I know, that's what has been done here. The issue of parking is inextricably tied to the issue of borough revenue. Because of the large number of tax-exempt properties, the borough has to rely on parking revenue to a much greater extent than comparable government entities. I suggest that while you're deciding this issue, this particular issue, you explore the larger issue about looking for alternate revenue sources, such as a modest drinks tax or something like that, and rely less on parking parking fees, which nobody likes. Thanks for this opportunity to express my opinion.
Thank you. Okay. Yes. Out there. Okay, good.
Hi, I'm Phil Goebel. I live at 132 East Middle, First Ward. It's an unusual situation for me, as most of the board members will know. I sit on the harp. And one of the things we do is to keep places from being demolished. Now we've got a business person who is upgrading in the heart of the town. Now, I don't have a problem with that. I don't know how many of you have meters in front of their house, but I happen to have 3. So when I unload groceries, I plunk quarters in the meter. However, I don't see a problem with allowing the meters. What I do think is whatever solution council comes up with, and it's your ballgame, that it be revenue neutral. Right now, I have no idea what they pay for the parking spaces to reserve them. So what needs to be done there, if you want to keep or allow the store owners to keep their meters, then it should be done in such a way that there is no tax implication on us. Because if we cut out those meters, or we start letting people go into those meters, if we continue to lose money on it, it's not a good deal. Would the shop owners be willing to pay what the borough loses? I think so. I think there need to be some regulation relative to how many can be done. But I've been watching the lodge get converted, and I'm going to tell you what, that's going to be one of the top places in this town. That's going to be a real kicker. And we'll get money out of that. The borough will get money. It's on the tax rolls. She'll pay. She'll pay the taxes for employees. You know, the one thing about Linda is that she hasn't scrimped. And sitting on the Harb, trust me, I have looked at projects that people want to spend $1.95 on a project that costs $500. That's all fine, well, and good. But if what the council does here on the parking ordinance happens to raise our taxes, then we got a problem. And I think most people don't realize that, and if they do, they don't want to recognize the fact that we pay for the parking. It is also our only one major source of income. But the other thing that I find is I walk my dog up and down York and the rest of the streets. What isn't there, and something borough should consider, is that people can't find the parking garage if they're from out of town. I don't know how many times a day when I'm walking the dog, somebody says, "Is there a garage around here I can park in?" Well, yeah. I think the signage is inadequate. If you go out Carlisle Street, and that parking is just immediately before the theater, show me a sign that says parking next right. It's not there. So those are some considerations. I would not want to be in your shoes. You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. So I guess it's up to you to flip the coin and figure out the biggest number of constituents that'll back whatever it is you want to do. Because, and like I said, I fight on the Harb to save houses and to save storefronts in this borough. And yet, she's done absolutely nothing but upgrade the streetscape. Am I done?
Yeah.
I see your finger on it.
I'm checking my clock here.
That's okay.
Phil.
But I appreciate it. And
Okay.
like I said, council's not in a good position, because either way you go, you're going to get hammered. It's that simple.
Thank
I
you.
think if you do something that will raise our taxes, you'll get the biggest hammer. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Phil. Yeah, I think I saw a hand up here. Would you like to give your name?
My name's Sally Allinger, and between the 1970s and the late 1990s, I ran a business in the suburbs of Gettysburg called Frogtown down Route 97. And I was on the travel council. I worked hard for Gettysburg for decades. When I started in the 1970s, it was very hard to be taken seriously. In fact, when I stood up to speak about some of the aspects of Gettysburg tourism that affected me and how much money and business I and Quilt Patch and Cootie's Farm were bringing to the area, some of the men were just aghast that I would stand up and even expect any help or cooperation. And now I see Gettysburg being revolutionized and changed entirely in beauty, in wealth, in facilities, and in tourism by the women of Gettysburg. And I can identify with their struggle, even though I'm old now, and because I've had some health issues, I'm not as well informed as I should be on this matter. My daughter called me with some of the information today, so I didn't plan to speak. But what I want to say is that as a woman and as a former business owner, I have to give credit to Jackie White, Timberl Wallace, Linda Attia, Lisa Brim. Women have changed this town for the better to an unspeakable dimension. I can't describe to you the respect I have. And some of the husbands were very helpful too. Women of Gettysburg, and I see so many of them here, who have made miracles in this town. Employment, all the things that have been so helpful to our community. And I want you to know that from what little I've heard tonight, I'm thinking that maybe this business could be grandfathered in, because more than anything else, I am determined to work for fairness for all these business owners, especially for some of the women I've mentioned and more. I want to make absolutely sure that the law is followed and that Linda Attia gets every possible accommodation that is legal and right and fair, because it's a miracle what the women are doing for this town. And they should be treated with every respect that any man would get, any other business owner would get. And I know many people who will fight for you to get those rights and be treated fairly. And we won't stop.
Thank you. Okay, are there any other comments on any of our, yes?
May I ask you to give me a whatever minute flag, please?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't want to get,
Sure,
I don't wanna-
Peggy.
I want to stay, okay.
Yeah, Peggy,
But
well,
you brought up some things. First of all, everyone here will have to admit they applaud what has been done. The projects are great, and I'm not even going to comment on my feelings of that. I'm going to go off of Phil's comments, and that is one of my concerns, because I know for a fact that I stop at one place and would love to have a 10-minute stop at almost every business, because you say, okay, I'm stopping over at Jake's, I'm gonna pick up some coffee, and then I'm gonna come up and, oh shoot, I wanna get some, something for lunch, so I stop at an Irish place that has wonderful stew, and I pick up something there, and then I'm going to the square, and I wanna pick up some bread there. So you do these little 10-minute stops, and it'd be nice if everybody had that same availability of a parking meter. But it has to be fair. And the fairness would be that everybody pays what I pay. I pay 25 cents for 15 minutes of parking. So everyone who has a meter that has a cap on it to allow me to stop in and get coffee or my bread or drop off a painting that's going to be reframed or go to my CPA, which I've stopped in and dropped off things 3 times in the last couple weeks. And yet you put in your quarters and pay. What concerns me about all of that is the fact that I asked some questions. And I found out that 25% of the borough revenue comes from parking fees alone. Not fines, parking fees. That $1,777,263 to be exact come from the meters alone. That's 25% of the total revenue. Without meter income, all residents, and I've gotten this information from a reliable source, correct?
Finance director.
Correct. A reliable source that the meter income, if we do not have this meter income from where we're getting it now, we who live in the borough will be paying 2.3 mils in additional taxes. Now, I'm not poo-pooing businesses. I think businesses are great. I just think that all of us have to pay. Not some of us paying some, but all of us will have to pay. And if your building is assessed at $100,000, you would pay an additional $203 in taxes. If you have a $200,000 assessed building, you're going to be paying $406 additional dollars. And without this funding, you're going to find out that without it, Public Works is going to be cut, police will be cut. I only have 2 stories to mention. One is, folks, if you live in the borough, look at your alleys. Weren't they all cleaned out? Public Works. Our curbs are patched, our alleys are patched. I watched the men this summer go down Carlisle Street and redo that storm sewer management when it was hotter than Hades. I mean, I even took out ice water to them and things. It was ridiculous, and they didn't have all the information that they needed because of old building plans. They spent hours in that hot sun doing that work. It's going to have to be cut. If it's cut, it's going to somebody's going to have to pay it. You're going to have professionals come in to do it. That's going to increase the costs. One other example is I frequently have the keys to several homes in Gettysburg because they have animals and they trust me to go in and take care of their animals. I went over to one of my neighbor's home, went into the lanai kind of area. The door's ajar. There had been 4 robberies in my end of town at that particular time. Am I going to walk into that house with a door ajar? No way. What do? Call the police. And in a nanosecond, 2 men were there and they walked into the house. And then they called the owner and found out that the daughter had walked off and forgot to shut the door. I didn't know that. And with 4 break-ins, there's no way I was going to do it. I want the police to take that responsibility. I want to count on the police to go up and down the alleys. At night, I don't know how many people are aware of it, but there are buildings that sometimes someone walks out, very prominent businesses. And I can name 2, but I won't. That somebody walked out and didn't lock the door. And major things could have happened if someone who is a culprit would open that door or just push it. We need to support those programs, and those programs will either come from 2 things, the meters or taxes. And we either have everybody be, as people have asked, fair. And to be fair, everybody will have to pay the same amount of money that the meters bring in order to cover borough costs. Or everyone who's here, who lives in the borough, is going to have not their assessments increased, but the percentage of tax upon that assessment will be increased. So it's a big decision that you have to do. And I'm glad that the people who are sitting across from me here are handling this situation, because having been in your seat, it would be a tough conundrum to solve. I just hope that I've provided just one more way of looking at the problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did I run over, Jay?
Yeah, a little
Little
bit, but
bit.
that's okay. It's all right.
Okay, yes.
So, I'm
Rebecca.
Rebecca Brown. I have to admit, I'm kind of clueless on the whole thing, but just trying to figure out what's going on here. I was looking at the ads in the paper also, and just to make a note, those of us who pay admission tax don't get free metered parking. I have to pay for the meter bags also, and that's strictly only for when I have groups come in. I can't use it for other stuff because that's written into my permit. And I mean, I would agree that it'd be nice to have pickup, drop off or whatever, but I think what I'm hearing tonight seems like we're thinking that everyone's getting attacked by the rewording, which from the one ad I understand is rewording loading and unloading. So I'm not entirely sure what the problem is. I think maybe what we need, what the council needs to work on is maybe updating the ordinances to include pickup drop off so that we're not talking loading, unloading, where to me that sounds like unloading a truck of supplies, not unloading grandma. So anyway, and then also just, to add in the different, I mean, we had the problem with parking and there's no formula for figuring out parking spaces for museums in Gettysburg, which surprised me. So that does kind of need to be addressed as far as types of business and parking. I would agree that we don't have good signage for our parking options like the parking garage. I didn't know about it coming into town. I mean, there's still the old Cyclorama parking down on Steiner that I don't think anybody knows about. So I think just using the lots that we have and making them more obvious. I'm sure if we ever used the school parking lot in the summer, we would need to have obvious information about that on the web and also signage. As far as the meters, I was originally in the yes, pay 25 cents for every 15 minutes until I did the math, and it's like $19,000 a year, which I know I wouldn't like. And I think that was just figuring in like 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. or something. So it kind of adds up, but I thought, well, maybe we could take what hotels pay with the lodging tax and like the filler tax and all that, and the 10% that we pay for admission tax, and like split the difference, okay, so retail has to pay sales tax, so maybe they pay 4% of their total income for the year goes to cover the parking meter or something like that. If it's a percentage of income, then it's fair, whether you're small or big. It's not asking a new little business like ours to pay $19,000 a year. But if you're going gangbusters, then maybe you can help out for a little bit more. But those are just my thoughts.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca. Yes, any other, yes, for residents, taxpayers.
47 North Hay Street, Ward 2. I really wasn't going to comment, but I'm going to need some help from the parking department. Did a little bit of calculations, now my math can be a little rusty, but it appears that in that first block of York Street, it's a quarter for 10 minutes.
Correct.
Okay, so that's 12 hours, 8 to 8, 6 days a week. And then 7 hours on Sundays. That ends up being the potential income of, and quote me, tell me if I'm close, $118.50 per week per meter.
About an average.
Okay, just average here, can work with it. All right, that ends up being $474 a month. People, businesses, if you want your own resort spaces, that's the price tag, okay? We cannot lose income in the borough. We've had a couple years of having to pay legal bills for all sorts of various instances and frivolous behavior, and it's impacted our taxes. They've had to go up. So we cannot lose that income. I don't really care if somebody, but if they pay the fee per month, let them have the space, because that's what we would have made off of it anyway. I think it's kind of common sense, but I don't know. Maybe I'm just simplifying things too much.
Okay, thank you. Any other borough residents, taxpayers? Yes.
Christie on Sunset Avenue, Quilt Park. I work for a food distributor here in Gettysburg, and we sell a lot of food to downtown restaurants in the area. To the council, you got a lot of work in front of you. You're the good, the bad, and the ugly. I understand what you just said about the meters, but what happens if Lisa at the pub wants 5 of them, and Jake wants 3 of them, and the guys at Gary Owens wants another 3, and then you have Blue and the Gray that wants that whole quadrant. Part of me thought, no, let's just stick with hotels and B&Bs. Well, what happens? I'm going to open up an Airbnb. So do I get free parking then? I think about Ernie's Texas Lunch, 1921. Could that man please have a pickup spot? Okay? He's never had one. He'll never get one. He's at a crappy intersection, and there's just no safe place for that to happen. But he's successful. People at the Blue and the Gray that have an hour wait, they are successful. In the past year, they probably purchased about $1.5 million in food. Now that's their purchasing. That's not what they sold it for. So think 30% food cost. That doesn't even take into consideration 1 drop of alcohol. So I thought, okay, you know what? The hell with all the bags. Nobody gets a bag. Just do away with them. The only people that can have bags are people that are doing construction on a business, you're working on that, or an event like the parade, like Bike Week, and just be done with it. It's a free-for-all. Park wherever you want to park. I grew up in the Elks Club. My mom did wedding receptions for 225 people. I can't tell you how many times I worked the door, because back in then, the days, those were the private clubs where you had to ring in. People just pulled up, they dropped off their guests, and they went and found a parking spot. Might take them 5 minutes, might take them 15, but it worked. So I'm just asking you to consider, if you just allow everybody to just buy a meter, well, I'm gonna go buy one in front of True Friends Boutique, because I just like parking there. Well, that's not fair. So what happens when the tourists come to town? Is there going to be signs on every meter? It says, okay, this one's for Gallery 30, this one's for Starbucks, this one's for the hotel, this one's for Majestic, this is for Lincoln Diner. And then where are they going to park? They're going to be like, all right, okay, who is going to police it? How many meter people are we going to have to hire to stand out? Are you going into Gallery 30 or are you going into Starbucks? Because if you're going into Gallery 30 and you're parked in Starbucks parking spot, I'm giving you a $25 ticket. Let's use some common sense. Just be done with the bags. Just be done with them. The only way you can get a bag is if you're doing construction. Or you have a special event, Halloween parade, Christmas parade, Bike Week. It's a free-for-all.
Thank you. I think I saw a, yes, yes. Yes.
Thank you. I agree with her. And I'm Alexandra Escalera, and I live at 32 East Lincoln Avenue. And I don't really have a dog in this race, but I am a business owner. I have the Raphael Inn and Bed and Breakfast. My husband also, George Escalera. We're in this together. And I really appreciate what Linda does and has done. She has a beautiful business. We think Gallery 30 is gorgeous. We send our guests down there. Some of these women get some very lovely gifts from their husbands, and they're very happy. I think her new business across the street is going to be gorgeous. It looks wonderful. I believe in things that are important to me. Things that are important are right and wrong. That's the two issues I'm here for. That's what got me involved in this to begin with. Over the weekend, I saw some things, with all due respect to you and your attorney and, your views, I was shocked when I saw these words in the ad. So I printed it and copied this photo that I had gotten a few months ago because I was stunned at that. And it's, these are your words in the article. We paid for the reserved spaces. They're indispensable to our business concept. And if you can see that, those are posts in the middle of the spaces. That's a business concept. That is odd. Whenever I think of business, like you've been speaking of, people need to park. So that doesn't smack true.
We're going to please let her speak. I don't know.
That doesn't smack true. And that bothers me. And the parking meters cannot in any way possibly be uniform throughout this borough. And that's what my seatmate was speaking of. It's not possible for everyone to have these spaces. And it's a tourist town. Like it or not, it's a tourist town. The locals use the town too. We'd like to get in and out quickly. I live here. I drive right past that little alleyway. I never, ever remember the parking garages there. I don't remember it. That's how a lot of us are. We're in a hurry. We don't think about it. And even if I did remember it, I would never take the time to stop and do it. If I had to, I'd just skip it. I think that, I know you've done things probably with this changing the ordinance. We have, with our business, not in bagged meters, but we have these. My husband makes them kind of fancy. These are parking permits, same concept. These are for our guests, so people can park. We have 2 of them. So he makes them fancy. Pretend there's a post outside across the street. We have, we pick a spot. I put this out there on a post and just put an arrow over to our property so people can see our place. That's not okay. Just because I paid for these meters or these permits doesn't mean I should use it for a purpose other than is intended. That's the problem with this part. The upper crust, as I understood it, was for, those parking meters were for construction. And I'm kind of a curious girl, and so months ago, I just asked, I did a right to know request. I had to pay for it. That was a little surprising, but I wanted to know how much the meters were. And I really wanted to know how the county was going to be, or the borough was going to be covering the difference in the loss of revenue. And what the other gal was saying, it's $400 and some a month per meter in lost revenue. That may be the meter number, but the actual revenue and what this town lives off of is not just the meter money, it's the fines. How much, I don't have that, I didn't have time to make a request, but how much is the actual fines that we collect? It used to be 700,000 in fines,
No.
parking fines. How much is it now?
For the year 2018,
Yep,
so far,
yep.
$69,800.
How many?
$69,800.
That's a lot of fines. So divide that among the different parking meters. So it's more than 473 a month lost revenue. It's plus the fines.
Alexandra, if you could just wrap up.
That's all I have to say.
Okay,
It's
all
a
right.
lot, it's a lot of loss. And we wish you well with all your endeavors. We'll continue to send people to all your lovely businesses, and you're doing a great job. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, one more taxpayer, borough resident slot, and then I'm going to open it up for everyone who wants to take that. Yes, yes.
Judy McGee, 256 Baltimore Street. God love you. I love Borough Council. And you haven't seen me a lot because I haven't felt like I needed to be here a lot because I have a lot of faith and confidence in what you guys do. Except today. This is so hard. And I've heard a lot of different things that I hadn't thought about as a resident living here. I love Linda. I was here before Linda. I remember the dark days of York Street and some of the awfulness down there. And I think we're kind of losing the point. This is not about money or about losing parking. This woman has put millions of dollars into many, many buildings in this town. I don't think that $400 a month on a bag is going to crash her gig. I think she's willing to pay the freight on whatever you ask her to do, because I feel like that's what she has always done. She's never asked a variance. She's never asked for an exception. She's never asked for special treatment. She steps up, says how much, and she writes the check. We have the Ready property, whatever it's called now, I'm sorry, I know it has a better name. Months and months and years of Lorda and Robin, I'm sorry, I let them.
That's wonderful. I don't take it personally.
I was
All
here
the time.
Okay. We have alerted, we have special exceptions, we've made height, which, by the way, I don't agree with the height, but I didn't talk about that because it was business friendly to the common cause of the borough of getting some more tax dollars into this community. So, okay, we make an ugly building, but it's gonna pay taxes, okay. But that's a maybe, they're not here yet. This woman is here, this woman is putting money in here, and she's not even asking for anything special. She's just asking, I'm paying by the rules, I'm playing by your rules, and now I built this concept, I did a business plan, y'all knew what I was planning to do, now I'm 2 months from opening, and now you want to change my rules. And I just don't feel that that's fair. If you're going to change the rules for one, it's got to be all or nothing. You grandfather everybody, or you don't grandfather anybody. I think that we either go to an all, or you got to either do it or you don't. But I don't know how you can selectively choose, because pizza is takeout. That's a hit and run. That is a huge part of the business plan of that building. So you're taking away her opportunity in a huge way. Retail, Gallery 30 across the street, we can argue whether retail is or isn't, hit and run is or isn't, loading or unloading. But pizza takeout is pizza takeout. It's not a spend 15 minutes, it's a drive, get your stuff, and skip on down. And there are 2 lanes of traffic. And I loved the graphic on the square. I thought that was brilliant, because if you clog that up for takeout, there's lots of, we get a motorhome out here with a guy with a car behind it. He can jam up the entire square for 10 minutes. You get somebody stepping here for 5 minutes waiting on pizza, they're gonna be blocked up all the way past our house on Baltimore Street. There's no easy answer, but I think Franklin Close, what's your pros, what's your cons, what's your best for everybody? Because I'm one of those taxpayers, and I'm like Peggy, I don't want to pay any more because she gets a meter and I don't. I've got 4 meters in front of my house, and they pay on Sunday now. And we get people who come to dinner and Saturday night, I keep a roll of quarters in the front, by the front door, because you gotta pay the freight. So, my 2 cents, thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to open this up to anybody else who wants to speak, whether you're a borough resident, taxpayer, or anyone else. So, do I have any other commenters at this point? Yes. Well, we'll see if somebody else wants to comment first, and then we'll. Yes.
My name is Kathy Gilbert, and I am a resident, but I'm here in the capacity of, as president of GARMA. And I'm only here because, not because of what's necessarily happening this evening, but to talk a little bit about the history of what GARMA has supported in the past for the timing on the meters. And we've always encouraged the 2-hour parking in the past, and that's why the borough has, from what I understand, made the ordinance in that aspect with 2 hours what it is. We, as GARMA, have recently gotten some complaints about the 2 hours being too short of a time for any of our guests to come in and eat and shop at the same time, and that they have to hurry up and run back to their car, and that makes for an unbusiness-friendly and unfriendly business environment. And so we're actually looking to do a survey to our business members to ask them what their thoughts and ideas are. I live in the borough, and I have many thoughts, but I'm not going to speak on them this evening. I actually am just thrilled to pieces that Linda is remodeling the old Moose building, because I have been in that building whenever it was the Moose. My husband and I were members at one point, and I'm sure that she's put thousands and thousands, if not millions, into this building. And I'm looking forward to actually going in and eating there, because it looks very exciting to me. But if I have to pay for the meter, then I have to pay for the meter, and I'm not one who would go in and do takeout. I would want to go in and sit down and have a beer with my pizza. So I would be someone paying for the meter. But with that all being said, there's so many different things that have been said this evening, and there are many pros and there are many cons. And we do want to create the best friendly environment that we can for our borough, because it has always been talked about how unfriendly, business friendly we are. And I used to also have my business in the borough. I'm now outside of town, so I can't really say too much about that. But whenever I started my business, I had to go in front of the borough council and I had to request parking variances. And so I know what people have to go through. And I have a tendency to think that what is fair for one needs to be fair for all, and that there should be no special privileges. And I have to say that I honestly do not know what the ordinance says. I have not read it, so I cannot speak on it in any way. But I do like the idea of everybody being treated fairly. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Going once, going twice? I don't see.
We have too many
yes.
attorneys in the room,
Yes.
Steve.
Yes, we are
Steve Rice.
we are opening it up.
I have an office downtown, but I don't own the building. There are some things that I'd like to say. When I walk out the doors of the Times Square building, I see the Majestic, beautiful building. And there's something unusual when I walk out. There are no parking meters. When I go around to the hotels and I see the bags, understand, I got my wedding reception in the Gettysburg Hotel, so I'm very much in support of what the Gettysburg Hotel is doing and what the Majestic is doing and what the other entrepreneurs, the hotels are doing in this community. But what I see is that they have these bags. And because I have a little bit of a political sensibility, or at least think I do, I wonder, how'd they pull that off? How does it usually get pulled off? Now, I don't know if any of you were around at the time they came up with this ordinance. I don't know if any of you know the history of the ordinance. But I bet someone in a position of power and influence, they knew somebody. They knew somebody that was on a council just like this. So here you have a business owner, someone who is a gem of this community, who comes along and doesn't break the law. She sees what everyone else is doing, and she decides, I'm going to take advantage of that law. She has a borough manager, and I'm sure he works hard, who has the audacity in a letter, and please correct me if this letter was not printed right. I see in this letter something that says, the unfortunate thing with most laws is that sometimes an individual interprets those laws too broadly, beyond the intent of the law. Who is he talking about? What has this woman done that is so wrong? You've done it for the hotels. You've done it for the college. Is there any real moral distinction between someone going and getting pizza or wheeling their luggage to the door of a hotel? I submit that there's not. Ms. McGee, and it's Judy, I think hit the nail on the head. You just need to be fair about it. And if you don't want to have bags on meters, nobody does. Nobody. But don't come in and say, well, the history that was probably backed by a powerful and influential person at one point or another, a law that was written by business. Don't say, because history said that was okay, we're going to exclude someone like her. Look what she has done for this community. She is the Hershey of this community. I say we call that block a Taylorville. She has done wonders. She helps all of our businesses. She helps all of our families. I don't want someone to discriminate in favor of her. I just want people to treat her right. Because what happens when you start not doing that, you lose your moral authority. And people start getting cynical about government. And it's not right. Please don't do it.
Yes, very quick.
I'm sure when we are, I just want to address one item that we didn't get, what they do need to address, and that's with how you identify the parking. And Steve made a great point. You see no parking bags. Now, when you see a no parking bag, ordinarily you think it's no parking, not reserved parking. And I saw in part of your ordinance you proposed to make it finable if somebody puts up who that sign is reserved for. If you are, and your ordinance would suggest there be some reserved parking, any reserved parking ought to be allowed to have a sign that identifies who it's reserved for, not state no parking, because that to me means it's not parking and I'll be ticketed if I park there, not that I will be able to use that. So I do think that part of your ordinance does need to be reviewed, separate from what we've dealt with Linda, but also when you get to how you identify what's there and how you keep people from who are the intended users to know that they can use it, not that you've reserved it and the people don't know about it except once they go into the store and are told, why didn't you use our place? Or they check in the hotel and say, why didn't you use our parking space? And the answer would be, Steve said, because it said no parking.
Anything else? It's now about 8:30, so is there anybody else? If you've already spoken, we're just taking from new commenters, please, because we've been here a long time. Some people are standing. So is there anybody else who wants to comment for the council? All right, then. And that means whether you're a borough resident, taxpayer or not, you can comment. Okay, so we're going to close the comment period and move on to our agenda. I want to thank you very much. It's been very respectful. I've been very impressed with all the commenters and how everybody has conducted themselves. Thank you. To those of you who are leaving, thank you.
All just left alone to shake our heads and wonder what just happened.
I think we should have like an attorney.
What? You need a break?
Only so many attorneys should be allowed.
Jake, you can finally get your spot now.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah, warm in here.
You asking, are you going to ask me to leave?
I mean, Harry, don't we have the maximum?
If anybody needs a quick break,
I have to run
we are
over.
going to reconvene our meeting. Those of you who are sitting way out there are seats here if you want to see the screen. All right, so we're going to begin with the rest of our agenda. We're still on page 1, current and old business, finance department. Oh, and Ms. James is just coming to her seat, so.
Needed a leg stretch,
Yes,
sorry.
what would you like to say to us about?
Well, you all have your reports. Obviously, it's December, but they're not final. I just can't stress that enough, because pretty much everything that happens in the next 60 days, more than half of that, is really for 2018. So while these are preliminary numbers, they're going to change a good bit.
Right.
So I just want to prepare you for that, so when I make the entries, most of them, on March 1st, after the 60-day accrual period is over. So you will see revenue accumulating, and most of it will disappear suddenly, and that's because it moved back to 2018. So I just don't want anyone to freak out or be shocked. But if you see anything, or you want anything explained between accrual, cash, and what we're doing, you know, my phone line's open, email, doors open. We're working on payroll taxes. We almost finished the W-2s today. They should be done tomorrow. 1099s, we're trying to wrap those up. DCED reports. Got to close out liquid fuels by the end of the month to make sure we get our money in March to work on road projects. The IT portion of the audit began. We had an IT auditor here the other day, contacting our software vendors, looking at our setup. It was very, very thorough, and that was all very new for me. So there's a lot going on, but we're just keeping our heads above water. This is our busy time of year. From now on, the auditors will be here the first Monday of March for the general auditor, but I will have other audits in between. So there's just a lot of things going on. This is just crazy time for us. So,
All right.
yes.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Ms. James about finances? We have a couple motions. Okay, I need a motion to approve all bills and payrolls for the month as presented.
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any questions, comments with those bills? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right. And we have a J.P. Harris tax exoneration. Do I have a motion related to that? So moved.
Second.
Okay. So we are accepting the tax exoneration report for tax year 2011 as presented. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Any discussion? I think there's only one name on it, right? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? At some point, that's going to go away, right? The J.P. Harris.
When Yeah,
Okay.
we switch collectors, but as long as they're holding on to stuff, you'll see
Yeah.
them from time to
Okay.
time for
I
them.
thought after so many years.
YTV does not exonerate,
Yeah.
so that's just something JP Harris does.
Okay, Planning Department, Zoning Code Enforcement and Harb. Ms. LeBar.
We've been very busy rounding out the end of 2018, jumping right into 2019. And one of our largest tasks is the regulated rental unit occupancy license renewal. So we've been working on that in partnership with the finance department. I did want to just very briefly embarrass/recognize Karen Mesher in the back for completing her 25th anniversary with the Borough of Gettysburg. And I just wanted to thank her publicly for all her help since she's joined the planning department in 2017, and she's my right hand. Thank you so much for all your work, Karen. We have several motions under my tab this evening, some having to do with HARB, ordinances, that kind of thing. So if there's any initial questions, let me know, and then I can walk you through as we head down the line.
Okay, well, let's start with the HARB motion. Those minutes from that meeting were in your packet, so that explained all that. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept the recommendations of the Borough of Gettysburg Historic Architectural Review Board, or HARB, following its review on Wednesday, December 19th, 2018, and grant certificates of appropriateness for the following applications as presented. COA 18-119, 344 Baltimore Street, Gettysburg Anniversary Committee for alterations at the rear elevation to construct ADA compliant entry. COA 18-120, 217 North Stratton Street, Catherine Crandall and Reuben Klein for construction of a new two-story garage at rear lot. And COA 18-125, 127 North Stratton, North Washington Street, Apex Holding LLC for installation of custom-sized vinyl replacement windows with the 9 historic windows most visible from the public way to be retained and rehabilitated.
Second.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and a second. Are there any questions about any of these recommendations? No, hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, that motion passes. The next one has to do with moving a date for or amusement licenses. Becky, do you want to?
Sure. I mean, Nikki and I can.
It's a joint request.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Please.
Okay.
We have a lot of these annually renewable permits that come up that, between the two of our departments, we have to deal with them. And to have everything renewing all at one time is difficult for us to get it done, but also for the people operating the amusements, a lot of them are the guided tours and also the carriages. So it sort of makes sense that everybody is renewing all at one time. This way, they only have to come in once. We only have to process it once. We don't have to do 2 separate processing, which takes a lot of excess time for everybody. And if we do this, we can create one sort of joint online in the Seamless Stocks program that we purchased. We can create an online application process where they could apply for all the licenses they need at one single time. So it really streamlines it for the business as well as for us, and it just makes more sense. The ultimate effect would be that any of the people that currently hold licenses, they get a 2-month sort of grace period before they have to renew, but honestly, nobody's really, it doesn't excuse them from the emissions taxes, and not that many people are busy or operating this time of year. So I think it's better towards their bottom line, because they're really not gearing up till April anyway. So for their cash flow, it'll probably be better for them not to have to pay that right now as well. So there's a lot of good points to it.
That seems to make sense. Do I have a motion regarding the amusement licenses?
I'll move that council authorize the solicitor to prepare, finalize, and publish for subsequent enactment an ordinance amending Chapter 13, Part 1 of the Gettysburg Borough Code of Ordinances in order to change the expiration date of amusement licenses issued by the borough from January 31st to March 31st of the following year.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion or questions about this change? Yeah, it sounds like the fact that all this was put onto one permit is working very well. I know that's something that you had worked on a few years ago, to combine all that, so sounds like it's much more effective. Okay, hearing no other questions, all those in favor of that change? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Okay, the next motion is regarding the International Property Maintenance Code and updating that to the 2015 edition. Becky, is there anything you want to tell us about this motion?
Sure. So this is a routine update. The IPMC gets upgraded from time to time, and we were enforcing under the 2009 version. Now the most current is the 2015. So we've been advised by our third-party code company it would be in our best interest to upgrade to the 2015 so that we're enforcing most effectively.
Okay, so do I have a motion regarding this update?
I'll make a motion to authorize the solicitor to prepare, finalize, and publish for subsequent enactment an ordinance amending and updating Chapter 5, Part 2 of the Gettysburg Borough Code of Ordinances in order to adopt the International Property Maintenance Code, IPMC, 2015 edition as the Property Maintenance Code of the Borough of Gettysburg. Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Are there any additional questions regarding this? Is this on our website? Will this be posted on our website? Is the code now
It can
on our
be.
website?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's publicly accessible through the International Code Council, so if people wanted to review that prior to your
Or a
enacting
link.
this change,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
can do that, certainly.
Now, this is to prepare and finalize and publish an ordinance amending, and so are there many amendments that we make to the code that are in our ordinance, or? There's a few.
There is a few, and those are going to be items that I'm going to want to review with our planning department and code enforcement and council as we develop this, because there are some exceptions. John Lover knows very specifically, because I believe that John, myself, Dale Gettle, and Sarah Stahl worked on the ordinance that we're updating and so forth. So there are a few exceptions, like for instance, John, you'll recall, fire extinguishers. We took a look and we made a special provision. So we're going to just want to make sure that things match up properly for the borough in terms of that. It's not just putting in place the 2015 code. So there's probably about 25 to 30 items that we'll just want to make sure that those are in line, that we're still dealing with the same provisions, and that those are the same regulations that council would want to keep in place with regards to property maintenance, if that makes sense.
Have you looked at the update, Jim?
Very briefly, yeah,
Okay.
just very briefly.
All right, then, we do have a motion and a second regarding updating our International Property Maintenance Code. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, that motion passes. And we also have a motion regarding a term on the Borough Planning Commission.
I'll make a motion to reappoint Sarah Kipp as a member of the Gettysburg Borough Planning Commission for a 4-year term and expiring on the first Monday in January 2023.
Second.
Okay, any questions, comments? I believe Sarah's here.
I just wanted to say something, that we are so fortunate to have a person with an advanced degree in planning and a professional planner on our planning commission. I serve on the planning commission, and we should all be grateful that we have Sarah Kipp as well as several other members of that group who have background and experience in planning. So this is a great choice for reappointment.
Very good. All those in favor of the
Aye.
appointment? Aye. Opposed? All right, congratulations, Sarah. All right. I just want to say something about the appointments process. Sarah is one of 3 appointments that we'll be doing tonight. We do have some vacancies, and I want to thank Chris and Patty for taking up some applications and following up on those. We did have an applicant who didn't live in the borough, so that wasn't possible to appoint that person. So we are working on, I've been working with Sarah to fill some of those vacancies, and I'll be getting more information out about what positions we have, hoping we get volunteers to fill them. So, now, anything else for the planning department? Any questions at all? All right, then we're moving on to the parking department. Okay, and there is a department report from Mr. Miller in there. Does anybody have any questions about that at all? Is there anything you want to say about that, Richard?
I do want to add just one highlight. I know that I have a section under recap of events in December. But one thing I want to add is that there has been free parking in certain sections of Gettysburg. Relative to that, the second block of Chambersburg Street was since taken out. And in doing so, for the last full week of November and the full month of December, because of that decision, we were able to bring an additional $4,090 because, again, it was back on the books. So it was a good choice by council to remove that section of Chambersburg Street. So I just wanted to mention that as a highlight.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. Are there any questions for Richard about his report? Then we're going to move to the motions. We have two motions, and they relate to changes to parking, Chapter 15. And before we get to those, there are two different motions, and Richard will be explaining those to us so we all understand what we're voting on with them, and you've all received copies of the proposed motions. I do have some comments that I want to make, I think, to again put this in context and what we're looking at so you understand what our role in the borough is, and some concerns I have. For many months, this council has been listening to input from community members and businesses about parking issues and how the borough manages parking, specifically regarding meter bags and blocked parking spaces. And we had a very good comment period, I thought, this evening regarding these issues, and a lot of input for council to consider. Tonight, the council is addressing that issue with proposed ordinance changes that would more clearly state when and how meter bags can be used. And just to clarify, we want those rules to do a couple things, and I think that was talked about tonight. One is to be in line with the intent of managing parking to meet the needs of various businesses, residents, shoppers, visitors, etc. And the issue of equality and equal treatment comes into that. And two, we recognize the role parking plays in providing revenue to the borough and reducing the tax burden on borough property owners. Those of us who live in the borough recognize that we have the highest property taxes. So it is an important part of that. Its importance as a revenue source to the tune of more than $1 million per year cannot be ignored. So those are important factors as we talk about the importance of parking to the borough. To be sure, we will never please everyone when it comes to parking. However, the borough has the exclusive right to manage our public rights-of-way. And it has the responsibility of council. It is our responsibility of council to make decisions based on the best interest of all our businesses, residents, and taxpayers. It is council's responsibility. Staff provides support to that. That is what the voters sent us to these seats to do, and they expect we will do so in a respectful, fair, and civil manner. And I'm glad that that's what we saw tonight. However, I have concerns. Recent accusations that were bandied about regarding favoritism, discrimination, vindictiveness, and even we had terrorism that came into this discussion through some postings on the web. And we had some concerns about that, and that's why we had another officer here this evening. But those kinds of statements and issues surrounding this, my concern is that we have to be very careful because they demean the process, they demean the council, and they end up demeaning the community. I think we had an example here tonight of how we can have good public discourse and exchanges about issues. And my concern is that what we see at the national level can poison legitimate and reasonable discussion on important issues. So we just need to keep that in mind as this discussion goes forward. Council will address some of the issues as we discuss the merits of the proposed changes, and in so doing, we can correct any misinformation that may be out there. Going forward, I hope we can ignore the voices that divide us and listen to those who understand that our strength and resolve to solve problems is in working together to the greatest benefit to our community, our businesses, and our residents. And I say that on behalf of the council and how we will consider what's been said tonight and consider all the issues that are involved with this. So I think if you want to do that, I think it was raised in public comment, and I know there was questions about a letter, Charles, that you had written. I think it was actually an email correspondence. And because that's been raised in in one of these ads that was put out, I want to give you an opportunity to address that and explain, what happened there.
Sure. It is the borough manager's and borough staff's obligation to interact with the borough council and to make policy recommendations for the betterment and advancement of the entire Gettysburg community, not for the betterment or advancement of a specific individual or business. What follows underscores this point. A paid advertisement attacking borough staff appeared in the Gettysburg Times today. Gettysburg Borough staff are hardworking, experienced, talented, and dedicated public servants. Their position as appointed public officials can and should be observed and scrutinized fairly. Where policy disagreements arise, their public positions should not be considered licensed to maliciously and falsely accuse or attack those employees. Neither should an employee be asked to tolerate unwarranted, unfair, and malevolent public attacks when policy disagreements occur. It is today's advertisement that will form the basis on which staff will report to Borough Council tonight regarding the matters before the council relative to parking policies in the borough. The advertisement begins with an accusation that the borough manager has his own personal agenda and decides what's best for Gettysburg. In fact, the manager's agenda related to this parking discussion is articulated correctly in the advertisement. It is the manager's professional advice to council to change the parking ordinance to better suit the original intent of the parking ordinance relative to the temporary reservation of parking metered spaces. Specifically, the manager states, as was printed today, quote, "The intent of the borough's parking ordinance is not to provide parking for specific patrons of specific businesses," unquote. That is the manager's agenda, equity in parking. It is further correct that this ordinance, as currently written, is vague on the definition of loading and unloading. Thus, the ordinance in this case was interpreted too broadly beyond the original intent, which means council should act to correct the matter. Further, the advertisement goes on to assert that the manager and his staff have, quote, "grossly overstepped their authority," unquote. The advertisement goes on to suggest that the manager dictates how the borough should change ordinances. Ordinance number 6613, passed on January 3rd, 1966, articulates the specific powers and duties of the borough manager. That ordinance, in part, states the following, quote, "He shall attend all meetings of the borough council and of its committees, with the right to take part in the discussion," unquote. Further, the duties of the manager continue to read, quote,
He shall cooperate with the Borough Council at all times and in matters that best interests of the borough and of the general public may be maintained, unquote. Further, the ordinance goes to say, quote, he shall keep council informed as to the conduct of the borough affairs, submit periodic reports on the condition of the borough finances, and such other reports as the council shall request, and shall make such recommendations to the council as he deems necessary, unquote. The borough's code of ordinance is clear. The manager has the right and obligation to interact with the council on policy matters, and is the manager's duty to recommend policy options to the council, which this manager proudly does. At times, the council accepts the manager's recommendations, and other times they do not. But let's be clear. The public observes council's deliberations and votes, as you will do in a few moments when they consider the motions under the Parking Department tab. You will notice staff says precious little at this time of deliberation and voting, unless addressed by a member of council. This is not staff dictating to the Borough Council. The excerpt of the initial email printed in today's advertisement should be put into context. The excerpt was lifted from a chain of emails between a member of the public and 2 borough staff members. As this email thread will be a responsive document filed in a right-to-know request, the email chain is a public record and reads as such. The original message was sent to Parking Manager Richard Miller. Message states, much discussion has ensued among friends and fellow Gettysburgians as to why and how 3 parking meters are bagged on a regular basis in front of Gallery 30 on York Street. Several people have had the shop owner run out to them saying that they could not park there. The spaces are reserved for her customers only. I know spaces can be reserved for special occasions, but did not think they could be purchased or owned. The racehorse parking garage sits directly behind this business. There are no excuses for this behavior. Can you please enlighten me to what exactly is happening here? I look forward to your response, Lisa Shower. Manager Miller's response to Ms. Shower. Lisa, I appreciate the email. The wonderful thing about democracy is the ability to engage your government about issues, concerns, and questions that you may have, and hoped that your inquiries can be addressed. Since arriving in Gettysburg, I have learned fairly quickly that parking here in the borough is a major topic of discussion. It can be contentious, it can be divisive, and it brings about a lot of emotion. Not always a good combination when trying to find resolutions. With all that said, Lisa, I am hoping to have open dialogue with anyone as long as these conversations are respectful and productive. Gallery 30 has reserved the right to utilize the parking spaces in front of their property because they applied and were granted a permit for those meter spaces. It is not something altogether new, as various businesses throughout the borough have reserved parking for their customers as well. I have heard on a number of occasions that the owner has become vigilant about ensuring that people do not park in the reserved spaces. While her approach may not be the most welcoming, I can understand her frustration because the meters are covered and clearly say the parking is prohibited. You are correct. Meters can be reserved for special occasions and events. However, meters cannot be owned or purchased simply reserved for short-term or long-term usage. You are again correct. Racehorse Alley Garage is a viable option. The owner of Gallery 30 chooses to reserve meters in front of said property and has the right to do so according to our local ordinances. Regarding behavior, I cannot police nor enforce anyone's actions. I serve at the behest of the borough manager in the capacity of parking manager. Lisa, I hope that I have helped you by providing some insight and clarity. Please feel free to reach out as you see fit. I'm here to serve the people of Gettysburg to the best of my ability. Sincerely, Richard L. Miller, parking manager. Lisa responds to parking manager, has copied me as borough manager. Mr. Miller, thank you for your quick response. I certainly understand all the issues Gettysburg has with parking after nearly 15 years of living here. I recently retired, but spent those 15 years in the tourism industry. Aggressive behavior of the owner is not something we can control, but this parking issue is something most will associate with the borough rather than the shop owner. I did not realize that meters could be reserved on a long-term basis. With Gallery 30's owner buying up properties all around Lincoln Square, it seems to many that there will be no parking available for customers or any other businesses. May I ask your permission to share your response to me with others online? Lisa Schauer. At this point, knowing that Richard Miller was still fairly new in his position, newly appointed position as parking manager, I felt the need to clarify the specific issue at the heart of this matter. So I respond. Lisa, please allow me to add a few thoughts here. Richard is correct in his responses to you. I just add that the borough is aware of the hardship this creates. The unfortunate thing with most laws is that sometimes an individual interprets those laws too broadly beyond the intent of the law. The intent of the borough's parking ordinances is not to provide parking for specific patrons of specific businesses. The exact issue for the borough currently is that the term loading and unloading is defined as, quote, the loading and unloading of goods, wares, and merchandise from any motor vehicle is hereby restricted to such length of time as is reasonably necessary, unquote. I go on to provide a web link for her reference. My email continues, the borough will need to revisit this ordinance and redefine the definition of loading and unloading to a much narrower definition. While changing an ordinance is possible, it does take time. This cannot be done quickly, as Borough Code specifically spells out the processes and timing of ordinance changes. During the interim, the borough can only enforce ordinances as written. It would be entirely appropriate for you and others with this concern to approach the business owner directly, as Richard previously said regarding democracy and respectful exchanges of ideas and concerns. And you may also find it appropriate for you to directly bring this issue to your elected officials at any meeting. I hope you find this information useful and helpful. Please feel free to reach out if you have any more questions or need clarification. I might add that Ms. Satia was permitted to use these spaces because she is correctly assuming, based on the narrow definition of, or the broad definition of loading and unloading, that she could use these as it was currently listed. However, that was not the intent of the original ordinance as passed. I believe it was in 1986. Council has yet to direct staff in a different policy direction. So, based on the policy directives that staff understands council to have, in summation, borough ordinance provide the borough manager with statutory authority to participate in policy deliberations with borough council, and further mandates that the manager recommend policy changes to the council as the manager deems necessary. For the betterment and advancement of the entire Gettysburg community, it is my professional recommendation that Borough Council vote tonight to authorize the solicitor to finalize and advertise parking revisions as proposed by staff. At this time, Richard L. Miller, parking manager, will discuss the proposed parking revisions with you.
Thank you. Yeah, I thought it was important that we put that into context since it was put out there in partial form. So, Richard, we have two motions. I think we'll take the Part 4, Chapter 15, Part 4 first. So if you could explain kind of just briefly up front what that's about and the changes that are there.
So,
Yeah.
thank you. Part 4 is directly related to the 3 parking spaces that we have for employee parking across the street on High Street, in addition to an additional space for ADA compliance or a handicap parking meter in that space as well. And then just a few feet up, we have 2 borough parking spaces for borough business. And so that's the crux of Part 4. And so we included that information, and we wanted to make sure it was added to the ordinance. Fairly well said.
Mr. Miller, I believe that's a very accurate assessment of what that ordinance does. Essentially, folks, that's a housekeeping item to make sure that our ordinances are consistent with existing conditions out on the north side of East High Street.
Which is across the street.
Which is right across the street. That is correct.
This has to do with some spaces across the street.
Right, yeah.
Okay. All right. Would someone like to make that motion?
I'll make that
And then
motion.
we'll have some further
Since I
discussion.
was in touch with the church.
That's right.
About a
You
year or so
were.
ago.
Yeah.
About a year ago, when they requested the ADA
space. So I'd like to make a motion to authorize the preparation, finalization, and publication for subsequent enactment by the Borough Council of an ordinance amending Chapter 15, Part 4 of the Gettysburg Borough Code of Ordinances relative to removing areas on the north side of East High Street from the on-street metered parking zones and designating areas on the north side of East High Street as a reserved metered parking space for use by persons with disabilities, as reserved unmetered parking spaces for use by borough employees, and as reserved unmetered parking spaces for use of the general public while conducting business at the Borough Municipal Office Building.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second regarding these parking spaces on East High Street. Do I have any other questions or discussion about that, providing that ADA parking spot? Okay, all those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that motion passes. So that brings us to the next motion, which is regarding Chapter 15, Part 7, which has to do with the bagged meters, temporary reservation of meters, I think it's called. So, Richard, if you could kind of take us through, there are different parts of this. The first has to do with temporary reserved parking spaces in unmetered zones.
Right.
And then we have a section that applies to metered zones. Okay.
And so the emphasis should be on the word and the wording temporary. And so as council, as the solicitor and I went through the ordinances, we want to make sure that the purposes of the ordinance revisions that we had made were spelled out very clearly. And so I'll take just a little bit of time to make sure I go through the specific uses for the metered spaces reserve or reservation, the unreserved meter spaces reservation that we have listed. So Part A, temporary reserved parking spaces for passenger buses and large capacity vans for use only in loading and unloading of passengers for visitation at historic sites and tourist attractions. B, the use would be for temporary reserved parking in use with connection with the conduct of funerals, weddings, and special events and services at places of worship. C, temporary reserved parking for the performance of construction work by contractors at adjoining or nearby buildings and/or properties to be limited to a maximum of X number of spaces for parking of construction contractor vehicles and/or equipment on a weekly basis to correspond with the good faith estimated time of completion of a project and times of active work and construction at the project site. D, temporary reserved parking for moving trucks and large capacity vans for use only in the moving and relocation of personal property, equipment, furniture, and furnishings to and/or from an adjoining or nearby building. And lastly, temporary reserved parking for public service or contract work or use by or on behalf of a government entity, municipal authority, and/or public utility. So those are the criteria in which we added to the ordinance to make sure it was clear exactly what you could reserve the meter for in an unmetered space. Any questions thus far?
No, I don't think so. I just wanted, we may have some questions for you once we make the motion and then have some discussion. We may have some questions. I just wanted you to kind of explain what we were dealing with here. And so that was the unmetered parking spaces. And I think there were some other changes regarding hotels, bed and breakfasts, and establishing number of spaces based on rooms available.
That is correct.
Yeah.
And so with bed and breakfasts, we added criteria in which the number of rooms would allow you or allocate you a certain number of parking spaces.
Right.
And so for 10 guest rooms or fewer, there was one reserved parking space that we had added. in between 11 and 30 guest rooms up to a maximum of 2 parking spaces. Between 31 and 50, be a maximum of 3 reserved spaces, and 50 or more guest rooms, a maximum of 4 spaces allowed.
Okay. And then we come to, were there any other things of note in the unmetered spaces that we should?
Not in the unmetered
Okay.
spaces.
So then that brings us to the metered zones, and some of those changes are similar to what is done in the unmetered.
That is correct. The same criteria in which you could have a unmetered space, you would be required to do for a metered space.
Okay. And then it also provides information about the application process and the fees.
That is correct.
Okay. And there are changes. The fee will now be established in a separate resolution adopted by Borough Council. I think that's a change.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. So that essentially is what we're talking about, and that's what the comments were. Yes.
If I could just add, and then we also added language in regards to ensuring that there were not any hindrances in the parking spaces. And more specifically, you couldn't place personal property to obstruct the parking space. It's a safety hazard, and we know that by state law and by state code. We want to make sure those spaces are free.
All right. All right, so that essentially is what's been proposed here. So if I could have a motion regarding that, and then we'll be able to discuss it in detail, whether we want to make any changes to it, and remember, this motion is regarding publishing this for public comment. So, do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion to authorize the finalization and publication for subsequent enactment by the Borough Council of an ordinance amending Chapter 15, Part 7 of the Gettysburg Borough Code of Ordinances relative to the temporary reservation and use of parking spaces in unmetered and metered parking zones of the Borough of Gettysburg, and the placement of open-top refuse containers in unmetered and in-metered parking zones of the borough.
Do I have a second to the motion?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All right, so now we'll have discussion, comments, questions for Richard about what's being proposed here. I have a question. I'll start with a question about the unmetered. Is how do they reserve an unmetered? How does that happen? Let's say you have construction and you want to park, right in front of your house. It's a
So
What-
currently,
what happens?
the operation now is you would give borough staff a call and you would request or even submit something online requesting your information on where you'd like your space reserved. If it's in your personal property, we would come out and place a buck in that space, and then that reserves your space for X number of days. Again, the goal is to make sure that it's short-term, and then borough staff will come back out once the permit has expired and remove the buck.
Are there any other questions about the unmetered or comments about the unmetered changes, which are very similar? I think the more controversy is in the metered zones. And they do, there is a permit fee, but of course there's no meter bagging, so there's, other than the permit fee, is there any cost?
No.
Okay, depending on the number of days?
Number of days.
Okay.
Correct.
All right, all right. Any other questions about part 4?
I do.
Yes.
No secret to some in this room, the word temporary is used throughout this ordinance, and I've had problems with that for 30 years because hotels, bed and breakfast is permanent. It is not temporary. And I don't need a legal definition to tell me what temporary is. Common sense tells me what temporary is. So we're still calling this temporary reserved space, but it's really not temporary. And the arguments that I've received from residents of the borough about the meter bags on York Street is the same argument. Is this temporary or permanent? And as long as we keep renewing, it's permanent. It's not temporary. So I think that needs to be addressed in this ordinance. I think the number of spaces needs to be addressed. And, you know, I go back a long way, and that's always a good funny comment here about being the old man on council, and I get that. I don't really have any problems with that.
Ted's older than you.
Yeah, but he's the mayor. So, but my point being is, if we're gonna spell out spaces, I think we have to have a maximum amount of spaces, and I think we have to define temporary. As much as I hate to do it, we can't write ordinances that just allow for common sense, because, no offense to the lawyers in the room, but there's too many lawyers.
That's what I said.
Yeah, I'm not arguing with you. So, I mean, I think we need a little bit more work here. I appreciate the work that's done, and I want to be the first to say that council, I don't want to say ordered, but conveyed to staff to look into this and come up with some recommendations. They didn't do it on their own. This council has been addressing this since at least May and maybe before that. But here again, as the old man on council, I can tell you that this subject has been approached for the last 20 years. And it's never been resolved. It's kind of one of those items that gets kicked down the road, it gets talked about, but nothing changes. So now everybody wants to change, so change. Quite honestly, I'm in favor of doing away with them altogether, but I'm willing to sit back and listen to what everybody has to say. But if we're going to use the term temporary, we need to define what temporary is, because temporary is not permanent.
Yeah, I think that brings us to the issue of the hotel, and that was and lodging in the borough, and how we have been handling meter bagging for that use, and where that came from and why we do that. But I do agree that it doesn't, you know, because that is pretty much permanent. I mean, those meters have been bagged, I think, as long as I've lived here. So that is not temporary. That's not temporary. And so maybe, you know, we need to address that and make sure that it's clear.
Remove it.
Or remove it. We could. I do want to say something about that, because I think in terms of what we're interested in as a borough, in terms of economic development and what happens here, I think we have to understand, and this is my feelings about it, having lodging in town is crucial to our businesses, our restaurants, and everything that goes down, that happens downtown in those areas. We are planning a conference next, this year, this fall, and we're going to be hosting 250, and they wanted to be in town. So that's 250 people that are going to be staying in town. They're going to be going to our restaurants. They're going to be shopping at our shops. That is very important to us. And I think at some point along the way, a prior council recognized that it's tough for lodging in an urban setting. You don't, you know, people expect to just drive up to the front, go in there and check in, get your luggage unloaded. You can't do that in the borough very easily. And so I think they recognize that in order to help them be competitive with those outside the borough, that was something that was very helpful. And I think that's something we have to consider. And that was even before we had pillow tax. And now with the lodging tax, it's even more important to encourage lodging in the borough. We've lost motels over the years. We just lost one out at the western edge of town. We lost all those rooms. And that amounts to about $160,000 a year.
About $168,000.
Yeah, about $168,000 a year. Again, that is money for services in the borough that doesn't, police protection, number one, that doesn't have to be then borne by our residents. We have very few ways to collect any kind of revenue from visitors. We host millions of visitors every year between parking and hotel tax. Those are the only primary ways, amusement taxes. The only primary ways we have to get money from all those visitors who come here and use our services, use our streets, want police protection, all of that. So it's important that our property taxpayers don't bear that. So I support making sure that lodging it can be competitive in the borough. I think that's just critical to all the businesses to have that hotel and all those lodgings. We were very surprised at all the rooms that were available when you went to the bed and breakfasts and things like that. One thing that does concern me is that those bags are on there all the time. And, after it's all checked in and the rooms are full, those bags are still there and those parking spots aren't being used. So I'd like to see, and I know it's very complex, and so you have to consider that, because then that takes staff resources to actually, make those spaces open whenever they're not needed. I don't know how you do that. That would be very difficult to do. But I do think there is a difference in terms of meeting borough needs with the lodging, and I think they contribute a lot. Not that other businesses don't, they all contribute, but I think that having people stay in town is critical to the success of everybody. So I think we need to take that into account. Charles.
I have a few questions of clarification. I apologize because I meant to send these over the last week, and so if you don't have the answers now, let's just move on and maybe I can get the information in another way. The first one is, and it really was brought up again in the testimony today by someone, and I don't want to get into the particulars of that testimony, but I'm seeking more information about the process by which some have been granted this temporary bag, and it seems, if we are to trust the testimony, that others have not. And so how that process has worked among our staff, where somebody got denied and somebody else didn't. Like, are there policies beyond this ordinance that you could share with us about how those decisions are made? That's something that just came up in this discussion, but I heard it once before. The second one is, Susan, are you arguing that that hotels and B&Bs might have a disadvantage if they can't retain the loading and unloading opportunity? Was that what your comment was?
Yes, I think that is something that we have to consider.
So I was just going to add then, given the number of comments that were made here, which included things like, perhaps we get rid of all the temporary bags. Should we perhaps talk to the B&Bs and the hotels and ask them, or seek more information among them as we consider potentially not going with this, but with something revised? I just throw that out there, because what about another kind of slippery slope? You have the question about temporary. Are there going to be Airbnbs and those types of businesses that are going to seek this type of this provision? I know it says hotel and bed and breakfast establishment, but if you go with lodging, is it perhaps going to be something that others ask for?
Let me
the
say
lodging
that
business?
one of the important components of cleaning things up and so forth is that we very specifically went with uses that were specifically defined. in
Already
our zoning.
defined in another part, so. with
Yeah,
the
we did not
definitions
go,
right now.
yes, there are, that's exactly why you use hotels and
Yeah.
bed and breakfast establishments.
Yeah, just to interject. This is one of the things that came up in August at our workshop when this was discussed. This was a moment when the staff, and that's part of my problem with the notion that this was something that was orchestrated by the staff, is it's just not true. In August, we had a workshop, and we had some preliminary materials, and there were certain questions. And one of them was hotels, motels, B&Bs, and Airbnbs. And it was a pretty quick, I think multiple people spoke up to strike Airbnbs, B&Bs pretty quickly because of the various other things that were going on. That's also where the stratification of parking spaces per number of rooms came from. It was also a moment we picked up about the fee resolution issue because as we go through these ordinances, we realize how many times we want to remove fees from ordinances because it's expensive then to go change them. Whereas a fee resolution we adopted every year, which is another issue that came up about that time, is that the fee resolution set year to year, so you can't really pay for anything beyond the given year because you don't know what it might cost.
And I apologize for forgetting that for a minute, but when I looked at this provision, it does say 10 guest rooms or fewer equals 1 reserved parking space. So I'm just thinking, like, in the life of this ordinance, even though the definitions are clear, is there going to be a renewal of interest in saying, hey, we need more lodging? There are ways that we're going to fill it. There are people who want to open their homes to this. They have 3 rooms, but then why are you privileging the hotels and the
I
bed and
agree that's a
breakfasts
very legitimate concern.
above them? And then
Well, I think there's one thing we should consider, and this is, I mean, kind of going on this, is that we have a couple of hotels in town that pay taxes on full parking lots. That, I mean, these spaces, even if we charge a little bit of money, I mean, they're paying for paving, they're paying for snow clearing, other maintenance on these large parking lots, you know, which, I mean, we've decreased the parking requirements, but still, I mean, there are property owners in town that, you know, are making significant investment in parking for their places, and if we have, you know, these Airbnbs that have, you know, 5, 6, 10 rooms that are relying on on-street parking, I mean, that I feel like that's kind of a discrepancy too, because, I mean, that's a huge investment, a parking lot, you know?
Right.
So,
I'm just thinking about trends in lodging.
right.
I don't have a magic ball about it.
If I had a vote, I'd go with John and eliminate them all, and the reason being, the ordinance was passed in 1986.
Actually,
30,
85,
40 years.
actually.
I'm sorry?
1985.
1985.
Yeah.
At that time, the James Geddes Hotel did not exist. Now it exists. It has adequate parking in the back, a short walk to the check-in. You can haul your luggage up. The Gettysburg Hotel, I don't know, was a parking garage here then? They kind of came together.
Maybe 4.
Okay. The hotels might have been a little bit ahead of the opening. All right, well, anyway, I'd make the case that that's probably where this ordinance came from. But at any rate, now the hotel has an adequate parking garage right in back of it. It has a pull-in in the back where you can deposit your luggage. Was it Bradforded Inn around at that point?
Mm-hmm.
It was? Okay. But it also now has adequate parking. And so, you know, to me, it's sort of an all or nothing. If we're going to be fair, it's fair all or it's fair nothing.
Well, so I said I had 3. So the first one was about how people have been granted these. The second is the definition of hotels and Airbnbs, and the third is we went through this with the height conversation. I wish there were these big crowds during that conversation, but we got through that. That's actually a good model if we're thinking about how to get through this. The way that individuals communicated with each other over a very difficult subject. We can look to, I think, even though I was in the minority on that one, as a model for how to go with this one. So I just wanted to say that. But the third is that we wanted to look at best practices in other similar communities. And I don't know if that was done with this or not. I imagine that there was some looking at that. I tried to do it on my own, but navigating different municipalities' codes and trying to figure out where things are was a little bit difficult for me. But I couldn't find the types of provisions, even for hotels, that we have in here and I'm not going to name all the communities I looked at, but in what I would consider similar kinds of communities. So it reminded me of a resident, Sue Sipperly's comment of, is our community of Gettysburg, whether we like it or not, more on the urban kind of plan, and similar communities are as well. And in urban kinds of plans, we don't grant temporary parking spaces like this except for in very limited situations, which would include construction work and events. So those are I don't know how this conversation is going to go or what we're going to land, but those are the three things that I think would be helpful for me to understand how to proceed.
Can I continue? Yeah, I think one of my concerns is when there's a lot of discussion about eliminating completely. And when this ordinance came up in August, I'm sensitive to the lodging and their situation, but my two primary concerns were things that one of them has not been mentioned at all, I don't think, by the public or anyone else tonight, is to make sure that they can still bag meters for funerals, because I certainly don't want the Catholic Church to not be able to bag meters and set up the funeral procession, okay, which is a potential consequence. And then we run construction, which is the other critical one. But any municipal need that we have are parades. If you eliminate everything, you're eliminating your ability to bag off meters before parades. You're eliminating your ability to bag off meters so that you can have your antique sale twice a year. Okay, so when we talk about all, that's my one concern. And if we have to severely restrict, if that's what we have to do to keep this going and to make things function, I can understand that. The complexity of this issue is severe. This is something I met with Ms. Attia, in the fall, and I told her it's a very difficult path to navigate. It's a very narrow path to make this function. And I've tried to find legislative means to do it, and I just can't. There are ways that you can allow it, but would essentially open up the gates and allow essentially everyone to do it. I agree with a lot of the comments about equity. And I also made it clear then I cannot get behind the notion of utilizing a grandfather clause. And grandfather clauses were invented to eliminate equality. So grandfather clauses were created to circumvent the 15th Amendment and stop the freedmen from voting. That's where the name comes from. If your grandfather voted, you could vote. Well, separate from that or not, creating a grandfather clause in any ordinance just creates you a lot of problems down the road because it creates an unequal playing field. So I want to avoid that under all circumstances.
There is a concept, though, that is appropriate, and certainly within your zoning ordinance, et cetera, is that you can't legislate to make something that is
illegal,
a legal use, illegal.
Right.
And that is the concept, if you will, of that type of provision.
It's a temporary permit.
Right, exactly. But this is, yes, exactly, right.
I wonder, someone, and I don't know the first name, I just wrote down S. Wallace, somebody in the audience addressed the issue of trying to treat all businesses equal and equality for everyone, and suggested that 10 or 15-minute parking on each end of the square. And I'm just wondering, I'm just curious about that, whether Mr. Miller or, Mr. Gable or others, know more about that, to talk about that. Having just spent a weekend in New York City, I'm kind of thinking of Sue Sipperly's comment about, kind of the whole urban experience.
Yeah. I've seen it I'm sure you've seen it places. I've seen it done metered in Portland, Maine. That's what they do. It's 15 minutes and it's a metered spot. And it's kind of a shock when you pull into it for the first time and then you realize I can't stay here.
Is there an officer that just sits there all day?
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say.
It's right at the dock side, and it's like the busiest part of the city. And yeah, I guarantee you they're making money in a whole bunch of ways, hand over fist, private and public entities. And I guarantee you ticketing's one of them.
What did you say, Wes? You guarantee what?
Ticketing is one of them. I mean, it was such that it was essentially impossible to stop there because of the parking availability in our situation.
But yeah, how do you police a 15-minute spot?
I don't know,
I mean, Bill would have to stand there and watch who parks there, I mean, because people just plug the meter. That's what people do. That's the reason Kathy Gilbert got up and started talking about the 2-hour time limit, we've had that for so long because the Garma years ago decided that what employees were doing were plugging the meter. So who's to stop someone from plugging a 15-minute meter?
Well, we,
Technically, that is a violation. It's far more the enforcement issue
Right, it's
of
the
Right.
enforcement.
how do you deal with that?
Right.
Well, technology may get us there, with the way the meters are right now, that they can send a signal. I think that's possible. That Richard's shaking his head. Do we currently have 15-minute meters on the square?
No.
Okay, so we removed those because when I read Chapter 15 has not been updated with the changes that we made about a year ago. When I read that, it says there are 4 or 5 15-minute meters. So we must have eliminated them.
Unless those are the bagged ones at the hotel.
Yes.
I don't think so.
Those are 15-minute meters in front of the hotel.
Well,
There's a 15-minute meter
I think
down
it
there.
was on different quadrants, though. I think it said where they were.
There used to be.
So,
Did there used to be? On each quadrant?
Well, and actually, the square in the first block each way used to have a 15-minute grace period at the
Oh, yeah, the
beginning
grace
of
period.
the time.
Right, the
So
grace
if you
period,
twisted
yeah.
the knob,
let me see if I
Yeah,
can.
yeah.
you got
yeah.
15 minutes free parking to run in and run
Right.
back out. And then those meters left when we upgraded meters, and
Right.
we had the same complaints from businesses downtown. People just keep going out twisting the knob and they park free.
Right, yeah.
Which I found amazing because a lot of the people that, when we started monitoring meters that people were telling us about, were actually employees of the store whose store owner
Right.
was raising hell about it.
Right.
Yeah.
They were his own employees.
Right,
Yeah.
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 Yeah, Susan,
Blocking the
I see you
customers.
have, in the ordinance, I see some 30-minute meters.
I'm
at the
sorry,
hotel.
it is 30 minutes.
But yeah, I see what you're talking about.
Yeah. So could we, could we consider having short-term meters like that and mark them clearly, and that they would then benefit everybody who, has any kind of pickup needs, with,
Trying to
is
create-
that a possibility? So
Quality,
that,
yeah.
different restaurants that have pickup, you could, use those or.
On the next workshop on the 28th, there will be an agenda item in the parking relative to loading and unloading zones,
Okay.
which is a concept Manager Miller is investigating. This may fit into that category.
Okay.
We do currently, with our current enforcement mechanisms, we do have the ability to do what's called eye chalking, so that we could track people who are parked more than 15 minutes in said zone.
So just a point of order about our discussion right now. What we're raising here, and maybe I was doing it too, are things that might be in different policies and ordinances, are we not? Or are we actually discussing this one?
Well, they're all in the parking ordinance.
But
parking
the
ordinance-
revisions that are in front of us to advertise right now.
No, once you leave the bags and talk about other meters, you cross that line.
Yeah, so I was just thinking, like, is it because we're thinking through in our minds, if we advertise this and if it passes, what kind of accommodations are we going to allow in other ways? Just think it's been a long evening and
That would be.
what are we doing exactly?
That would be a possibility, that we would pass this, but discuss other ways to meet that kind of pickup kind of needs, or really short-term needs.
I think if we're considering restricting things very severely, that you need to kind of address.
Right.
At least think it through before you restrict it so severely.
So then I just follow up and say, are we then taking seriously the questions or comments that were made today about let's eliminate it, all bags, maybe save
Right.
the special events, and then in that case, how do we proceed with advertising this if we're going to make that kind of change?
Well,
If that's what we're gonna do.
if we decide that, to make changes, then we would not pass this.
Right, but I think we could craft something
Right,
that if
and
you
something-
wanted to remove, for instance, if you wanted to take a look at, because I do think it is prepared very narrowly for very specific reasons, But you're talking about the hotel and bed and breakfast establishments, which you may choose to carve out. Because I think that really is the one provision that goes beyond, if you will, the very, very narrow. Although candidly, that narrows down the provision that was previously just special loading and unloading, which, as is noted, that there are provisions that I think that are going to be recommended dealing with loading and unloading, but.
Well, I never want to advertise twice. I like to do things right the first time and get it over with, but, so if we were to table this motion that we have on the floor, is that?
Or postpone action.
Okay, obviously that's your favorite. But either way, it's still on the table. We can discuss this and decide how we want to approach it. Because obviously, all the comments that were made tonight have broadened the scope of what we were originally talking about since May.
I agree with John. I mean, as much as I don't think delay is a tactic, advertising a public hearing twice and paying those costs, and we had 18 comments today, and I will say some of the things that were raised I hadn't considered, and I'm curious to see if the parking department, the manager, considered it. I do want to just say one thing, and then I'll stop talking about this, is that I celebrate all these businesses in Gettysburg and try to frequent them as much as I can. I also, though, don't think this discussion is the place to have a referendum on one business or one business owner. I think this is the place to have a discussion about the logic of our parking and sound planning in the borough of Gettysburg. And so I would hope that we would all stick to that. I'm not a cynic, like one resident said, and think that, like, this was developed at some point in the past because someone knew someone who owned a hotel. I mean, maybe that's true, but it
probably is.
Well, I don't want to operate in a world where that's true. So I want to operate in a world where we actually do this logically, rationally, and not speedily, just for the sake of speed.
I guess,
I would
Right.
clarify, there is no public hearing requirement.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Right.
So, but it's still
With
advertising in the
regards to-
paper.
Yeah, oh, absolutely, and I
Yes.
was not suggesting, I mean, clearly this could be also something that council wishes to, take further look at, postpone action this evening and do further work in work session too. Remember, there are a number of issues. I look across at the mayor, one of those was, he said, I want to get out of the parking business. So.
And I'm glad
I said that.
We did that, actually.
Right.
But you're still going to be in it
That's
here
right.
while we.
We're always going to be in the parking business, and we're never going to please everybody. But the other thing to think about too is that, this does reflect, I think, instructions that we gave our parking manager back in August. This has not left the borough, so people have not seen this. So they have not had an opportunity to comment. Comments tonight were mainly aimed at the ads that they're seeing and things like that. So we haven't really gotten full feedback on what's proposed here. So that would also be a reason to put it out there and do that, and then we could make the decision to change it or based on that. So that's another way of looking at it too. At some point, we have to put something
Of course.
out
So
there.
and there were a number of.
Yeah.
And I don't think any of the changes that anybody's proposing are that substantial that.
That's
it
why
would
I'm asking.
really-
Like,
Not in this.
I think it's
But
worth
those
I
publishing
mean,
the language.
there are some big changes that need made, you're right.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'd agree that we should probably publish the language because there are just things that people don't consider.
Right.
We talk about construction, and that seems fairly obvious what that means, but, there's a segment here about, essentially when you load up a newly occupied structure of this nature or residential, can you get a meter bag for that day to unload your large moving truck or not? And are there properties that don't have rear access potentially, to make that work, or you create it? So I think it's worth making the language to the public so that they can review it in full. So if that means advertising, then I think that we should do that.
Okay.
But also asking the parking manager in terms of looking at some of the things we discussed that are new to this thought process that might make things more equitable across the board. I think that's what I would hope to see you know, as we go down this road in terms of discussion. I mean, I'm comfortable with tabling it tonight so that we could allow for, yeah.
Well, we are going to be discussing, apparently at our workshop, another element of this that we might want to include in this as well.
Yeah,
with
that was
this.
probably going to be a standalone
'Cause it would.
follow-on to
Right.
these amendments, but
Okay.
you could certainly wrap them together.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know why everybody's talking about temporizing this. Why are we talking about temporizing this? We need to get, I mean, Susan's correct, the public has not seen this. All they've seen are the ads in the newspaper.
Well, apparently some
and
of the public's seen it.
well, but probably. But, I mean, the
Lawyer read part of it. so
well,
obviously you saw
I
it.
know, but I mean, the reality is we should advertise this to get it out there to facilitate more conversation.
I'm on board.
And instead of saying, oh, okay, well, we need to take another month to then discuss how we want to then put it out for people to talk about it. I mean, we're just postponing another month. There's enough. I mean, we're building a structure and then building on it. You know, so I mean,
I
think
was
we should-
hoping that Alex would write a close enough article that we'd get that publicity free.
right.
And I mean, pages in there. It's gonna be a long night.
I just, if, you know, go ahead, Wes.
No, I was
Okay.
just going to agree with you. Pay the newspaper their money and let's get the full language there. It might not be the final language.
Yeah,
but like
it might
let's
not
get
be.
the language
Right.
there.
Right,
Yeah.
and we may
People
want to
can see
add
it.
on from our discussion. I just want to say one other thing, you know, to keep in mind that parking in the borough is public parking. It's
Correct.
for the public. And I think I have concerns about, you know, opening this up the way it's currently worded. You know, businesses, multiple businesses, restaurants could decide to do this, and pretty soon you have all these bagged meters in your downtown for private spaces for those that can afford to pay for that. Some of our businesses, they're all important to us, and some of those businesses can't afford this. So I think we do need to be fair to everyone and think of our entire business community as we look at this. So, yes, Charles, I saw a hand.
I just had to look up temporize because I forgot the definition of that word. And I think that, do you know what, I mean,
Yeah. Okay. That's why I used it.
I just learned a new one.
Let me look it up.
In order to gain time, avoid an argument or postpone a decision. So maybe I would just disagree that that's the aim of this. And
Well,
at the same time, that there were a number of people here who said, I don't know what's in the ordinance, but here I'm going to say some things about it. I do think that might be a problem.
That's what I
Yeah,
heard.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm
that's a
saying.
problem.
Yeah.
And yet, what I asked the solicitor, when I asked our parking manager, is if we start pulling the threads at some of this thing, you know, because of what we heard today, or what our thoughts are, or our additional research, will that mean additional cost, and will that get us into a worse place than if we just delayed it 1 month? I don't know what the speed is that would help the process, other than people need to see it. So I'm kind of two minds about this.
The motion is narrowly tailored to meet your borough code requirements as a step within the enactment process. Candidly, with John Laver, I would really hate to see you advertise it for enactment if indeed this is something that still is subject for debate. I look at this as kind of essentially the fait accompli, if you will, of moving forward to make this enacted legislation. I mean, is there an ability, I mean, I'm sure there is. Would you prefer to have it published on the borough or posted on the borough website so that, you know, it's out there, people can, and then I don't want you to pay advertising fees for the enactment, but not go to the enactment process, is what I'm saying to you. Just
I'd remind you how long you agonized over the height ordinance in an attempt to get it right.
Yeah.
This is the first blast of the parking ordinance. You know, if you want to get it right, it's going to require a lot of deliberation.
Yeah, I agree avoiding to pay any unnecessary costs. I just want
Right.
to ensure that it's adequately
But
available.
get it posted so
It needs
that
to be adequately
language could be looked at.
So I guess the question may be, is borough website publication sufficient?
It's not sufficient for us to enact it.
No, but for our purposes of getting feedback.
I dare say that reading the public notices It's probably a much better way of getting
Yeah.
the language out there to the public than,
Right.
than
Right.
the legal notices that.
Yeah, is
And I-
posting it.
And I would almost bet that social media will do a lot of advertising for us. It may not be in our favor, it may not be accurate, but it will be out there.
Okay, so are there any other things we want to say? Remember, the vote is to publish or not publish. If we decide not to publish, we will be discussing parking again at our workshop at the end of the month, and we can post this on the website and see what other comments, and perhaps we can reach out to our lodging facilities to get comments from them as well, because we didn't get so much of that tonight.
So we
So,
had
if
some in
we're-
August.
Yeah,
So if we defeat this motion, we'll then post the draft on the borough website. That's where we're at.
yes,
Or,
or
or,
Ariel.
or
give
if
us
you,
another
I mean,
choice.
or if you postpone action on this.
Okay.
This particular motion is when you have the
Okay.
ordinance ready to go as a legislative enactment, this is the action you want to take. To get, like, it's the final step before making it your ordinance. So you don't want it, I would think that based on what you are discussing, that what you would want to do is postpone action on this particular motion, and then what you would do is direct to have it, to have the text of the proposed ordinance published or placed on the borough website, whether or not this is something that you're going to then direct that we're going to look at further in a work session. However, you want to gather more information before you take that step of enacting.
Do we have to designate the subsequent date?
No.
Okay.
No, unless you want to.
So do we withdraw this motion and do that, or we just take a motion to postpone?
It's a motion to postpone this particular action. You may be taking this particular action at a later time.
Okay, so the
Based on-
motion still stands, it's just postponed?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not so much a defeating of the,
Okay,
Understood.
yeah.
okay.
Does that, if we make a motion to postpone, do we need to include that we want this posted on the website?
I think that would be an appropriate
Mm-hmm.
caveat to that
Okay.
particular motion.
Okay.
Okay. Does anybody want to comment any further or make a motion?
Make a motion that we postpone this action and that the ordinance draft be published on the borough's website.
Second.
A motion and a second? Any further discussion or questions about that?
Just a point of clarification, I think you would need to withdraw the previous motion, correct?
Yeah, or, I mean, essentially what you're doing is postponing action. Yeah.
This is like a sub-motion, right?
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're okay.
Okay, any
We're
other?
not going to advertise
Just stop-
it.
no, it's cross-
We're enactment.
Okay, yeah.
We need to vote.
We do need to.
We need, okay.
Yeah.
I think we're ready to vote.
I think so.
Okay, all those in favor of doing that?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Okay. All right, so we're going to postpone.
What was that vote? Do you mind if I ask what the vote, what was that? 5-1?
Vote was to postpone.
But what was the total?
6-1?
6-1.
Is that correct?
And I
Okay.
apologize for stirring that up since I won't be able to make the workshop.
So, thank
Of course, John.
Jeez.
All right, well.
All right. So that's where we are. Okay.
More or less.
Okay, so we're still with the parking department. Does anybody have any questions for Richard?
That's not a tough decision.
Any comments for Richard?
Quite a little
Richard.
deliberation.
All right. Okay, we're going to move on to Public Works. And I would like to congratulate Robbie Harbaugh on his promotion to Public Works Director. Is that?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
have his name there.
Yeah.
What do you have for us?
No speeches, sorry.
No speech.
None of us have a name.
You have my submitted report, and this time I don't have anything.
That's great. Good job, Robbie.
Okay, thank you, Robbie. Borough Engineer, okay, report. Chad.
I'm going to make Jake mad because I do have a couple of updates. to
You
give.
do.
I'll be real brief.
It's only 10 o'clock.
We're gonna need a bed and breakfast. Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
So there are 4 motions, but real briefly, you do have a copy of my written report and a couple of quick highlights. There was an advertisement by FEMA on updated floodplain mapping that was advertised in the newspaper. Several property owners will be affected by the new floodplain mapping, which could have an impact on their flood insurance. So I think it's a very important topic. I know it's getting overshadowed by everything else that's going on here, but it's a significant impact to a lot of the constituents. There's currently a period where you can challenge the new mapping. I will say that FEMA and Army Corps put a lot of time into that mapping, so it'll take a high-powered challenge, but there is a period right now where you can challenge it. In the spring, we'll be forced to update the floodplain ordinance in accordance with the new mapping. So that'll be coming in the next few months.
And the significance of that is that if you're within a certain floodplain, you have to purchase flood insurance?
Well, the way that I understand it,
Yeah.
I'm not an insurance guy, but the way that I understand it is mortgage companies are requiring it if you have a mortgage
Right.
with them,
Yeah.
and that's what's the challenge.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
it's if you, I guess only if you have a mortgage.
Which is expensive,
Yeah.
I hear.
Do you have a new map?
Yes, the maps have been advertised online. There's a copy provided to Charles, and we can always try to send those out to you as well. But the best way to get them is online on the FEMA's website. But I can send you the link to the website.
You would?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, if you could send that to me, and I'll make sure all of
And
council.
ultimately, this will be a topic for the Gettysburg Borough Stormwater Authority, but we're just not quite ready to get into the business yet.
Okay, thanks.
3 quick things on some street work, Stratton, Broadway, and King. In May, June, and July, rather, you'll start seeing work on King Street. This is something we've been planning for years. In May, we'll be first replacing some storm sewers. In June, we'll be redoing the curbs and sidewalks. That's the CDBG curb ramp replacement project. And then in July, we'll be completely rebuilding the street. So folks in that part of the neighborhood will be seeing that construction, and remember, that also includes 1 block of culp. So again, I'll be coming to you in the next couple of months to get your authorization for advertising for those construction documents, but we have started a significant amount of work on the survey and the design of that project. Next, Broadway. I invite anybody that in the public at this point that's still here to hear about Broadway, but we will be discussing the islands. I did ask the manager to put that on your agenda for the workshop meeting this month. It's important that I get direction from you guys at that meeting on the islands on West Broadway and the street diet on East Broadway. And if we intend to still be able to build that this year, because we still need to do the design, bidding, construction. There's still a lot to do yet, so I'm really hoping to get a decision on that, or at least a direction, a nod from you guys on which way we're heading with that at the workshop meeting this month.
And you did send out some information about that and
Yes.
some drawings
Yep,
of
there's
options.
There's options, so it'd be just, it could be as simple as you guys picking which option you want to go with and giving me direction.
Hey Chad, the West Broadway folks have a petition out. They send it out. They're going to vote on it, so they're going to come with a consensus of
Excellent.
what they would like to see. So
Excellent.
they'll provide that input then.
And I presume we'll also have a discussion on the NID component of
Yeah,
it.
well, they're gonna agree on that too. So they're
Excellent.
gonna, yep.
Excellent.
And
Okay.
East Broadway, we're gonna reach out just to follow up with the idea of the street tables, you know.
Excellent.
So,
And then Stratton Street, there's a couple of motions on your agenda, but big ticket items are that the utility work is complete. That means water, sewer, gas, stormwater, all of the underground infrastructure has been replaced at this point. Now we're starting the process of buttoning the surface up that we tore up over the past year, curbs, sidewalks, concrete work. And then once we finish with the curbs and sidewalks, that will happen between now and April, and then in April is whenever we'll be putting out a contract to completely overlay the full width of the street from end to end. So at this point, again, utility work's done, and we're just starting to work on buttoning up the street. So you're still gonna see construction over the next couple of months, it just won't be as intensive as you had seen over the past year. So that's perfect segue into, I'll just say a couple of words about the first two motions, and then we'll burn through those, and then I can say a couple more things about the other two motions. But first two motions are both regarding Stratton Street project. The first motion, change order number 4 for $11,505.58. Last month, you guys did give me your blessing to proceed with that work. We did a work directive change at that time. This is the administrative action that follows up with that work directive change and actually formalizes the contract change. That work was for the sewer line that we ran into. Like I said, it's par for the course, and when we do work in the borough, we run into a utility line that we weren't aware of. This is one that went and it had a blind bend and it changed directions on us, and we didn't know it was where it was. The solution was blessed by GMA. GMA also agreed to pay for most, if not all, of the cost of this. So Mark Geis and GMA have already made a decision on that $11,500. We'll have to follow up with them to get reimbursed for it, but it has to go with our contractor. Since our contractor already had the contract with it, the change order goes through the borough, and then we'll work out the finances with GMA. So that's the change orders for that relocation of the sewer line in Stratton Street. And then application for payment number 4 includes the approval of that change order. So should you not approve that change order, then you should also not make the motion for the application. But assuming that you will go with the change order number 4, we are ready to make another payment to the contractor in the amount of $115,079.79. That will take the total paid to date to $523,000. As you know, this is an over $700,000 project, so we still have a significant amount of money that we're holding. A couple $100,000 that we're still holding till they get through all of these surface restorations that I've been telling you about.
Okay.
So that's it.
Okay, so let's make some motions here.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve change order number 4 to the Stratton Street Storm Sewer Improvements Contract in the amount of $11,505.58.
Second.
Okay, motion and a second. Do we have any questions, discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Next motion for payment number 4.
I'll make another motion to approve application for payment number 4 in the amount of $115,079.79 for the Stratton Street Storm Sewer Improvements Contract.
Second.
Okay, motion and a second from
Myself
Wes.
and Mr. Strauss, either one.
Yeah, I think they were tie.
Okay.
We'll give that one to Wes. Okay. Any questions? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Did you want to say anything about the next two, or? They're
The
pretty.
next one is about advertisement for the pavement improvements for Stratton Street. We contracted 2 different projects, one for the utility work and then separately for the pavement. So we need to advertise that project. And again, the schedule is for a April or May paving of Stratton Street.
You will make those residents happy, because we will be done then.
And I know that it's been, I know that it's been challenging for a lot of them, but
Yeah.
I do feel like, and they probably wouldn't agree with this comment, but I do feel like the project has been pretty efficient.
I think.
For the amount of work that got done there with 4 different utilities that have gotten replaced over a year. I know a project I did in Hanover for 2 years, and it seemed like there was construction on those streets for years before they finally got the street paved. So
Yeah.
getting it done within a year, I think, was pretty efficient, but I appreciate everybody hanging in there with us
Yeah.
while we moved through the construction.
Sounds good.
I'll make a motion to authorize the borough engineer to advertise Stratton Street pavement improvements project for construction bids.
Second.
Okay, questions? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? And the last one is a payment to Lobar. Do I have a motion for that?
I'll make a motion to approve application for payment number 1 to Lobar Associates, Inc. for the 2018 Bridge Maintenance Program in the amount of $47,531.75.
Second.
And that's number 1 and final payment. There's only one
Okay.
payment for that bridge work, but that bridge work's complete at this point.
Okay,
So that's it, just that, this is.
That's it.
that's done.
Great.
Any questions? Okay, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, Police Department. Chief
Hello,
Savati.
ladies and
Hello.
gentlemen, you have my report. Would you like me to read it to you?
No.
Do you accept it as written? Then I'll be seated.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Manager Gable.
Before I get into my report, while I was reading that email thread into the record earlier, I inadvertently missed a statement that I wanted to make sure was on the record tonight. It should be further noted that the borough manager did not post this email exchange on any social media site, as is incorrectly stated in today's advertisement, and which was referenced in the email thread. With that, we should point out that the borough has a new mechanic on board. Ty Wilkinson is now a borough employee. Robbie hired him a couple weeks ago, and so far he's working out quite well, and we welcome him to borough staff. The budget message, the Manners' budget message is posted on the website for everyone to see. It's under the Finance Department under Budgets. It's very easily accessible, or you can just search for it in the search bar on the website. And some hard copies have been presented to council on that as well. The overall note on that is it's a little more upbeat than previous manager budget messages this year, so that's a good thing.
Nice job on that. by the
Thank you.
way.
Thank you. A couple typos in it, but I was working on it late at night.
Yeah.
Mr. Clayball addressed the Broadway construction and design options to be presented to him on the 28th. And I would just note that the Pennsylvania Municipal League, President Noggle mentioned this earlier, the borough staff has been going out and soliciting funds to pay for that conference, and I just wanted to put on the record that Destination Gettysburg has committed $2,500 and additional in-kind services for that effort. So we should thank them for that.
Thank you. Anything else? Any questions for the manager? All right, then we have a motion regarding an appointment to the Shade Tree Commission.
I'll move to appoint John Selhammer to the Shade Tree Commission for a 5-year term expiring in October 2023.
Second.
Okay, Mr. Salhammer will replace Shirley Carlson, who had been on there for many, many, many years and had decided not to be reappointed. So that's the seat that's open there. Okay, all those in favor of that appointment?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Now we have motions related to adoption of our meeting schedule for the rest of the year.
I'll make a motion.
Before you do that, maybe we could get a consensus about the work session B, the work sessions scheduled for Monday, December 23rd.
I was wondering
This year, we dropped the December, do we have any objections to dropping that as we make this motion? No. Okay.
I don't know what I'll do that night, but okay.
You'll be wrapping gifts, I'm sure.
Traveling anyway, John.
A motion for both the business meetings and the workshops?
Yeah, I think it's to be one
massive
one motion, so you have to
One,
read
yeah.
all of these dates.
Okay, so I'll make a motion
Okay, except December
to
12th.
hold the 2019 monthly Borough Council meetings on the following dates at 7 PM prevailing time, whatever that is, in the municipal building, and authorize the Borough Secretary to advertise the same in the Gettysburg Times. All of these meetings are on Monday in 2019, so I'm just going to read the dates. February 11th, March 11th, April 8th, May 13th, June 10th, July 8th, August 12th, September 9th, October 15th, November 12th, and December 9th.
Which are not Mondays. Those are on
And these are on
Tuesdays.
Tuesdays. October, November aren't.
Okay, October
Yeah.
and November are on Tuesdays.
Okay.
Now that fouled me up.
Yeah.
Okay. And we're also going to hold the 2019 monthly Borough Council work session meetings on the following dates. These are all Mondays in 2019.
Except there's a Tuesday.
There's a Tuesday.
January, that's a Tuesday. January 28th, February 25th, March 25th, April 22nd, Tuesday, May 28th, June 24th, July 22nd, August 26th, September 23rd, October 28th, and November 25th. We're going to hold two special 2020 budget workshop session meetings on the following dates, both on Mondays, October 21st, 2019, and November 4th, 2019. We're going to hold two public hearings regarding the use of Community Development Block Grant Funds, CDBG, on the following dates at 6:30 PM, both on Mondays, August 26th and September 9th.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And we have a second? All right. Any questions about these dates? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. All right, we are down to liaison reports. Deb Adamick for Main Street Gettysburg.
Happy New Year.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Best report you've given.
You can read my report in our packet, right? Okay, Gara.
Nothing.
Okay. GMA, just two things. We did approve our December 17th, we did approve the 2019 water and sewer budgets. There is a 10% increase in water rates for 2019. The other item was the water storage tanks, and they're in the process of, GMA was in the process of contacting municipalities, both Cumberland and Strabane will host a tank, and so they are meeting with them about that process that they have to go through to get approvals and permits. And under GMA, we also have a motion to adopt a resolution to replace, reappoint Susan Sipperly to the GMA board. So can I have that motion from someone?
I'll move that council adopt a resolution appointing Susan Sipperly as a member of the board of the Gettysburg Municipal Authority for a 5-year term commencing in January 2019 and expiring on the first Monday of January 2024.
Second.
Okay, a motion and a second. Questions, comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Planning Commission.
Nothing from planning. We haven't met since our last business meeting.
Okay.
So-
Steinway Avenue.
Nothing.
Okay. Adams County Boroughs Association.
We meet Monday night.
Monday night would be the meeting of that. The COG. Anything happening there?
Did not make their meeting again.
Okay. And ACTPO has not met, so I have nothing from that. Adams County Heroin Awareness Task Force.
Very briefly, I learned how to put minutes into the shared drive. So in
Oh,
your packet,
wow.
you have the minutes from this, and you should read them because the last meeting was 12/18, and you should know that the name of the thing is now called the Adams Overdose Awareness Task Force, and they have been reorganized, and there is lots of serious work that's identified in this set of minutes, including a website where it's tragic to talk about this, but the deaths in Adams County are tracked. So University of Pittsburgh puts that out, and it's really worth council looking at those minutes. I'll attend the meeting tomorrow at 11:45 for their January meeting.
I did look at that data, and it was heartening to see that 2016 was really high,
Yeah.
but it has been dropping.
2018 was 13, and
Yeah,
the coroner
I
said there
mean,
were 2 pending. But
Still too many.
Yeah,
but-
too many.
Yeah. Trail feasibility study. Chris, are they, anything new with that?
Well, the Grand History Bike Trail from Gettysburg to Emmitsburg, they're still not ready to select a route. They're still meeting with property owners, and they're looking to have a public meeting in the next month.
Okay, all right. And under other reports, Judy did communicate with me that the recycling committee did not meet, so she had no report for us this month. So, and the EMS report, I can't remember if that's in the packet or not.
It is.
It is, okay. So we have any final comments?
I'd like to make a
Anybody?
comment. So I had typed up a parking manifesto that I wanted to read tonight. It is, however, 10:30, and
long is it?
it's not that long, but I want to flush out these ideas. However, since it's late and we're apparently pushing off parking again, then we can discuss it in the workshop meeting later this month. And I have a couple of ideas. I think as much as we want to compartmentalize parking and only change things once, I think we need to think about it more holistically and how we need to change it regularly and various parts, because I think we need to fit the marketplace rather than continue to try to hash out these rules that'll just stick for the next 40 years. So anyway, I think that it's important that we have a discussion at the workshop. I have some ideas that I want to bring along and talk about, so I'm skipping over that tonight.
Good. Is this something you could share with
That's what I was
council
gonna ask.
members
Instead of
before
reading
the
it to us,
meeting?
I can, but don't show up at the meeting and surprise me by changing everything, changing the field. So I will share some ideas, but I would like to discuss these as, an organic conversation.
Well, we would discuss it
But-
at the meeting, but it would be
Right,
helpful.
right,
to think-
right.
we
See your
have some time
manifesto.
to think about
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
We won't
Chanel
change
manifesto.
anything, we
Right,
promise.
all right.
Okay. That would be helpful.
As
And
much as I've
thank
looked
you for
forward to
that.
any
And
manifesto.
You're right, yeah.
anything else from anyone?
I will not be at the work session. It's York Adams Tax Bureau Board meeting that night. If you feel the need for Finance Department presence, I can ask Tammy to attend here. And the other thing I
We'll let
wanted,
Charles, once we know the agenda.
He's not gonna be far, far.
Oh, you're not gonna be here. Well, when we do the agenda, we'll determine whether we need her or not.
the other thing I wanted to put on the record, especially since the television cameras are rolling, is that the first Wednesday in February, after the York Adams Tax Bureau Board meets, the Adams County Tax Collection Committee meets. And we need to get a quorum. We need 21 people to show up, because we have not had a quorum at the July meeting. We did not have a quorum at the November meeting. And at this meeting, we need to renew our agreement with York County to continue our partnership to have York Adams Tax Bureau Board to form this. So if you see other members of other municipalities when you're out there, please make sure to encourage them to send a representative from their municipality. If you see people at the Boroughs Association or the COG. I have also volunteered, because I go to these meetings and it's very frustrating to continually go to these meetings and not be able to get anything done, especially when I've driven all the way to York. I have actually volunteered my services to be alternates for other municipalities, because I'm going to be there anyway to try to get the business of the municipalities done. So I volunteered my services. I want to let you know that I.
So that can count toward the 21?
Yes,
Okay.
we have several people that vote and are proxies for other municipalities, because smaller municipalities don't have enough people often to appoint an alternate, so I volunteered to be an alternate for other municipalities, and then that would count as an additional vote to help reach that. So I'm just putting it out there. We need everybody in Adams County to show up. Thank you.
Be sent to them or an email?
We've
You'll
already,
send that? You do that?
yeah, Lou Ann Dilly has already taken care of that, but to date, as far as the responses to the email, it looks like we have 15.
Oh,
So we're still not at 21.
okay.
Thank you.
And I was going to make an announcement, but I advised council last week, I think that was on Thursday, late Thursday, that I would not be seeking reelection. So this will be my last year, my 12th year will be my last year on council. But it wasn't but hours after I announced that and also talked to Marty Qualley that I got a call from the Gettysburg Times, so it's already been in the paper, so I don't have to make an announcement. But I just want to say that it's been a pleasure the past year working with this group. I've enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would when I said I'd take this position. And I'm looking forward to working with you this year because, I think it's a good group. We have a lot on our plate, so we're going to get her done. So.
We'll miss you and your leadership.
Yeah, well, I'm not going away yet.
No,
so
I
I'm
know. We're not going to let you go.
But you have to make these decisions because the election starts, that process starts in March. So I just want to say that, anybody who's here, anybody who's watching who is a borough resident, you have to have been a resident for, I believe, 1 year.
1 year continuously.
1 year continuously in order to qualify. You have to be a registered voter. And so if you have any interest in public service, it's very interesting work, very challenging, and I'm sure there's a lot of people in the borough who would do a fine job
And this
here.
could be
So think about
anyone
running.
from any of the wards, because it's an at-large position, right?
Or this, my position is at large, so I represent all the wards, so you can live in any of the wards. There will be other positions up too, so if anybody's interested, feel free to contact me. I'll be more than willing to talk to you about what it's like and what the expectations are, so. Anyway, that's it. Do we have anything else to talk about? I don't think so. So we're going to, public comment. We have another public comment, and Kathy's been waiting. Yes, Kathy.
Just a couple of little tiny things. When we're talking about temporary, the banners are only allowed to be up for 30 days total in a year.
Okay.
And so when you're looking at possible temporary in the parking of it all, and I do know that there's a place in town that has had a banner up for at least 4 years, maybe longer, just saying.
Where? I'm trying to think where that is. Okay.
And when it comes to, I don't know if I was trying to hurry earlier, but whenever I was talking about Garmin, the 2 hours, that process started whenever there were businesses who were, the owners and/or the employees were parking in front of their businesses, which it still is happening. But it was a concern of other business owners that they were losing business coming through. So that's why we originally chose the 2-hour time slot. And we, in the future, will be recommending a different amount of hours.
Okay.
And then the last thing that I want to say is that I just want to clarify that the second block of Chambersburg Street not being signs for the holiday season was because Garma chose not to offer that. It wasn't, we offered that to you, and yes, you approved it, but I just want to say that Garma said, we'll give up that second block.
Okay, all right.
Because I was on council, that's why she did it.
It's Jake's block.
It was
I'm just
nobody
picking
else
on
had
you.
a second block, and it didn't seem fair that nobody else had a second block.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you. Yes.
Okay. I'm Jenny Dillon. I'm going to speak on 2 halves here. One is a business owner in town of Artworks, and the whole York Street and parking garage. I feel that as a resident, I really didn't even know what Racehorse Alley parking garage was. We locals know it's Racehorse Alley, but when our tourists come in, they don't know what Racehorse Alley is.
Yeah.
It's not going to register with them that is a public parking garage. A lot of them feel it's the hotel's garage and they can't go in there. So I get that as feedback from my customers coming in the store when we recommend for them to go back there and park. That they did not know they could park there. They felt it was an extension of the hotel.
Okay, well, that's good to know. Thank you for
So
that.
that's just something I wanted to say on that end. And on a Garma side, as far as talking about temporary or permanent, somebody brought up the antique show, which is a event that's under Garma's umbrella. I think you do need to look at what's temporary and what's long-term, because that is a temporary thing that should always be granted to have the meters bagged. They have time frames on them. And it is a ton of income that's not only going to those vendors, but to our downtown businesses. As the owner of Artworks, we can see our business triple that day when the antique show is downtown. So I would hope that if you look at temporary and want to throw that one away, then you're throwing away twice a year the revenue for the antique show.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
I had a question, just in terms of the garage, it is referred to as the municipal garage, municipal parking garage, that make it...
Gettysburg Community Garage, something like that, that says...
Or just
Or
public
public.
parking.
Everything.
Yeah.
Or if it had a huge blue P on it.
Yeah.
That would, I think, make the biggest difference.
Well, but
Yes.
there is, if you're coming York Street, you're coming up towards town, at Stratton, there's a little sign like that that has a P.
Yeah, there's a small P.
That doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
Thank you. People won't realize it. And one more thing I can add to that, not that I want to incur any taxpayer money, but if the alley could be paved a little bit better, I've also had issues with people in wheelchairs
Yeah.
saying about coming across there, which is why they'd rather park on the street, because it is level pavement, level sidewalk, and there's no issues with mobility.
Portion of that alley will be paved in April and May.
Okay. Yes.
Mike Shestak,
Mike.
still at 264 Broadway and still here in the borough.
You haven't moved.
I'll be quick. First of all, I applaud council for their patience and listening and hearing to what the public had to say in the first public comment thing. I realize that went long. One of the concerns I've had, and I know Charles was working on it one time, and we talked about parking, is the school parking lot down there at Lefevre. One time, 88 spaces were there. You know, that's still crowded on weekends, and those are people that have learned to park down there and not park on Baltimore Street. So, you know, those are meters on Baltimore Street aren't being used, and I think you need to work with the school there, bring that up when it's appropriate. I applaud whoever marketed Sue Sipperly for GMA, because she understands sewers real well, living on Stratton Street, and Sarah Kipp sticking around for another 4 years, as I know you almost lost her. I have a small comment on Chapter 15, Part 7. You know, I'd like you to see you settle it amongst yourself and, you know, some concerned citizens. I think you did the right thing by kicking, you know, that particular motion down the thing. I'd like to see you settle it here amongst friends in that, rather than in the courts. And I know Charles certainly doesn't need a lot of right to know requests, because the staff is already overworked, you know, to do that stuff. So please be sensitive to that, but I think you did the right thing by kicking it down the road. On Chapter 15, Part 4, this part of High Street, I think whoever works that needs to look at a couple of other options. Right outside this door here, okay, is the Presbyterian Church. They worked a deal with the library for some of their employees to park there. You know, that lot is empty a lot, except for funerals, weddings, and church services. And you can relook some of these things over here where the mayor is parking. I'm not suggesting he lose his parking spot, but, you know, move some of those around, or for the handicap. And also, the borough has, right here on my favorite alley, you know, Schoolhouse Alley and Racehorse Alley, you've got some spots you can probably negotiate all the way up to that tree where the Presbyterian Church has things. So look at some of those other options that were within the perimeter here. And basically, you did a good job tonight. I'm proud of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Okay. Anybody else to wrap up the comment period?
On Barbara's behalf,
Quickly,
on my
yeah.
behalf, I want to thank Rob Harbaugh for everything with Christmas this year, with putting the tree up, taking down, getting the banners up. It has been a great pleasure to work with him.
Thank you.
Okay. Hearing no other public comment, seeing no other hands, we are now going to go into an executive session. We will come back to adjourn. We may have a vote.
Mark there. Motion to authorize the solicitor to prepare and file in the Court of Common Pleas on behalf of the Borough of Gettysburg in an action to quiet title filed to docket number 2018-SU-1324, a stipulation or responsive pleading to be signed and attested by the President of Borough Council and the Borough Secretary, confirming that the Borough has never ordained as a public alley a certain strip of land located between certain properties in the Borough identified as 59-61 East Water Street and 69 East Water Street, and that the Borough does not make any claim of any right, title, and interest to said strip of land as a public alley of the Borough or otherwise.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion, questions? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right.
Make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to adjourn. We're adjourned.